We are live. This is Emil Fisher with another episode of the BCTL Podcast. Today, I've got very special guest, Stephan Kesting. Mr. Kesting is a truly prominent figure in the jiu-jitsu and martial arts community with his contributions through through website and service called Grapple Arts. And he has a master's degree in biology. Am I correct, Stephan?
In biology, yes.
And has been posting quite a bit about the COVID-19 crisis and has some strong opinions that may be counter to many people who might be watching this. And I thought it'd be really interesting to bring Stephan on and have a conversation with him about some of his findings, because he has done a lot of research that many of us have not. How are you doing this evening, Stephan?
I'm very well, thank you.
Yeah, we were supposed to go a little bit earlier, but
I'm sorry, I totally flaked on you. I forgot. I'm a firefighter, as you mentioned, so it's an 8-day rotation. But now I'm combining the firefighting with full-time homeschooling with working on grapple arts, and so I get confused as to the day of the week all the time. And
yeah, it happens. So. It happens. We try to roll with the punches on this. I mean, I've been trying to contribute something positive by doing these little episodes every day. So when this initially, when the pandemic initially started, there were two kind of schools of thought. There was, many people that were saying jiu-jitsu is far too risky to do right now and will be for a while. And then there were people on the other side of things that were saying, well, this is our way of life. Risks be damned, we're just going to continue training. And you seem to be more on the prior. So tell me a little bit about some of the data that you read about that led you to that conclusion.
The central thing, then, I'd also like to address the risk issue as well, if we can at least circle back to that. Because I'm in a risky profession, and I've done many risky things, but I think this is different. So I'd like to go into why I think that is different. Yeah, it's interesting. I was kind of following this thing early in the new year, and it sounded like China had yet another outbreak of something crazy. I mean, they had SARS. SARS is a big deal in China. They've had other outbreaks there, but it's over there. It's over there. They handled it before. They'll probably handle it again. And then, what's this? It's in Iran, and it's in Italy, and it's in all over Europe. And it seemed like people were taking kind of a North American exceptionalism thing, like, that's over there. But I think there were a couple people. I mean, Joe Rogan seems to have switched his tack now that it's affecting him personally. But quite early, he was talking to doctors who were saying this is a big deal. And Sam Harris was another guy talking to doctors who were saying this is potentially quite a big deal. And so I started looking at what was happening over in places like Italy. I was in Milan, I want to say 2 years ago. So the thought of this city and the hospitals in Milan beginning to collapse as doctors and nurses were getting really, really sick tending to patients, and then this tending to exacerbate the problem, right? I mean, we've got whatever the fatality rate is, and I think we're getting a better handle on what the fatality rate of COVID-19 is. Whatever the fatality rate of it is, it's much worse if there's no doctors to take care of you. It's much worse if there's no ventilators. It's much worse if there's no room at the hospital for you. So following what was happening in Italy, and then when it started getting here, British Columbia, where I live, is right across the state line, right across the border from Washington State. And Washington was one of the first epicenters of the American explosion. So we were like, holy crap, we're in for it now, because we're right across the border. And I think around that time, I was giving it thought, and it's like, there really is no better way to spread a virus than jiu-jitsu. I mean, short of group sex. It's probably safer having random one-on-one sex with unknown people in bathrooms than you are rolling with 20 people in a jiu-jitsu context. So I started using my, at the time, we really didn't know. And that's a theme here. We still don't know. Anyone who says, this is what is going on, this is exactly what's happening, this is what's going to happen in the future, they're tending towards disqualifying themselves, because I'm reading the scientific literature, I'm reading all the well, not all, it's like 3,500 preprint papers, but I'm looking through a lot of the preprint information coming out, and there's still no consensus. People don't know, and there's a having been part of the scientific process, man, it takes a long time to do good science. So back, I believe, maybe March 1st, I used all my social media power and my email and my website to say, look, something's going on. Let's take a couple week break from training. This is beginning to get through North America. And back in my mind, I was thinking, like, if it's really got a long incubation period, it did seem like it had a very long incubation period. Somebody could be sick and spreading it for a long time. So even if there's only 10 people in your city who are sick with it, there's probably 100 people who have it. All right, this is the back of the envelope math back then, and I think more or less that's been borne out. And that was kind of the genesis of it. Watching what was happening in other countries. And as time has gone on, like, not every place that's been hit by this has had its medical system collapse, but now New York, certain hospitals in New York came pretty close to collapsing. Mexico City is really under strain right now. Sao Paulo is very close. The medical system there is very close to collapsing. Certainly it collapsed in Wuhan initially, and many doctors and nurses got sick, which really means that there aren't as many people to treat the people coming to the hospital sick. So I think that the data is pretty good that this can be a pretty bad thing if it gets out of hand.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the things that, so I've kind of been in limbo as far as feeling like it goes towards the realm of not necessarily conspiracy, but overreach. Sure. To absolutely, respecting the danger of it. Stephan, we've got another person who is in this industry who just sent me a message that asked me to come on. Would it be okay if I bring another person on this?
Sure.
Excellent. He's knowledgeable, and he's also very much on your side. Oh. So bear with me for just a moment. I'm going to go ahead and send him an invite to this. So one thing I did want to ask you about is the curve flat at this point?
Depends where you live. I mean, in most countries,
you just got very quiet.
As did you there for a second. Am I back? Your volume.
Try again.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. You can speak.
Okay. Is the curve flat? This isn't my area of expertise, but it does seem like in most countries it is flattened out. I think if you look at it in the States, you probably have to go more state by state. But yeah, I'd say the curve is flat. Now, that's a good thing. The question is now what do you do? Right now, do you and I think honestly the position of like stay locked down forever and ever and ever until this thing's gone, I don't think any serious person is really proposing that. I mean, that's clearly not economically viable. Like what stay locked down, accept the garbage man to come take your garbage away, and the grocery workers to bring you food, and the doctors and nurses to take care of you if you break your leg, and the hello,
Stephen, I've been a fan of yours for years.
Oh,
I
think
think
so much.
what you've been putting out regarding first off, on the jiu-jitsu front, I'm a fan of yours for years. What you've been putting on the jiu-jitsu front is brilliant. I love it. I don't always agree with everything you put out, but I sure do appreciate the effort, and it's solid. You got solid stuff. Yeah. But I'd like to point out, first off, I'm eating a plate of bacon. I've got my martini, and I want to talk about some stuff because I'm confused. Florida, I live in Florida. I'm one of them Florida men, and we're opening up. And I'm worried everybody's going to get sick, but also I see the economy. Mm-hmm. and I don't know what the hell to make of it. So I'm thinking like I might go live out in my barn, quarantine my family, and I'm the only guy going out. We look at Sweden. Sweden had horrible ante numbers. Like, so if you're playing poker, you pay the ante to get in the hand, and they're paying ante numbers. I don't know if it'll pay off.
And neither does anybody, right? That's right. I'm really glad there's a Sweden. I'm really glad they're doing that experiment.
We hope it works out.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, you and I have chessed a little bit over Trump's love of the hydroxychloroquine treatment.
Hydroxychloroquine.
Yeah. But a lot of people are on that for malaria. I was on it for malaria for a couple of years. I mean,
sure.
I'm not really worried about the side effect profile.
So the hydroxychloroquine is interesting because I think in a fair, and I'm more familiar with the clinical trials. Like I've got to confess the limits of my knowledge, right? I'm reasonably familiar with the clinical trials of testing hydroxychloroquine for its effect on COVID-19. And I know it's been a malaria drug since forever and a rheumatoid arthritis drug since forever. But there's a big difference between giving somebody a drug when they're reasonably healthy or they've got rheumatoid arthritis and giving somebody a drug when they've got some other condition. Say that they're on death's door from chemotherapy, right? They've got, I don't know, bladder cancer and they're on chemo. Are you going to give them another drug right now? Are you going to give them hydroxychloroquine because it's been proven safe for malaria use over 40 years? No, right? It's a different arena. So it's really the data coming from, I mean, it's reassuring that people haven't been dropping dead for using it for malaria or rheumatoid arthritis. But really, it's the studies that you got to look at are with regards to its effect on COVID-19. So there's lots of anecdotal evidence, right? There's lots of people saying, well, I treated my patients and they got better. Or here's a poll of this many doctors who think it's the best drug. Or they're using it in Italy. Here's this doctor, or there's this doctor in France. Okay, fair enough. And his patients got better. Well, when you're talking a disease that's, 1% infection fatality rate is pretty serious, right? Like the Spanish flu was somewhere in the vicinity of 2%, 1% infection fatality rate in the United States anyway means like 3.3 million dead people, or actually somewhat less because not everyone's going to get it. Call it 2 million, right? 70% of the population infected, 1% infection fatality rate, which is the latest data that I was reading just today from a giant study taking a look at fatality rates worldwide and trying to correct for the number of tests that have been done. But still, 99% of people are going to survive. So to say they all took hydroxychloroquine and this group of 20 people, they all got better, that, we would expect this by chance. So really the gold standard for testing a medication is a randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial. So that means that, and I've seen that, like I've screwed this up so many times doing little experiments in university. So what does that mean? What does a placebo-controlled thing mean? Every study that's ever looked for a placebo effect has found one. So if I come to you and I say, hey, I'm terribly sorry, but you've got COVID, but here's hydroxychloroquine. And for whatever reason, you think hydroxychloroquine is going to help. It will help you just through the placebo effect. Every study that's ever looked for a placebo effect.
Well, you make a brilliant point. One. I mean, like the entire antidepressant industry is built on the placebo effect. And good for them. If you can find a placebo that works for you, whether it's music therapy or your pill, take it. I only give 3 compliments a year, so I'm going to use up all 3 of yours right now. You're brilliant. You got integrity. And I meant brilliant on the jitsu side. And you're quite well read on this issue. You're sharp. You're sharp as a tack. Now, those are the only 3 compliments I got, Steve. So the one thing I want to ask you, though, is you never worked in a hospital, did you?
I've been in hospitals, both as a patient and as a first responder, but I haven't worked in a hospital. That's true.
So I worked in the operating rooms, and I used to work. My thing was brain surgery, so I was in a lot of brain surgeries. And the thing about brain surgeries, the running gag is people go into that field because they like problems that aren't easily solved. So The truth is, when we're on frontier medicine, and you and I have chatted about that, you got to take some risks. You got to take some gambles, because the time frame of getting the very good things that you advocate doesn't meet the time frame of the epidemic. So we have to be a little anecdotal, a little bit.
Yeah. So
that being said, I give you a fourth. You know I love you.
So when there have actually been a few placebo-controlled, like, so many steps are being bypassed now in research and publication and in medicine, right? Like things that I'm in the fire department. We are doing experiments on whether or not N95 masks could be reused. So 5 years ago, if I'd said, hey, we need to figure out how N95 masks are being reused, they would have told me to go pound sand. We are never, ever going to reuse N95 masks, except now when we don't have any, right. Please. And we're going to use ozone. We're going to basically create a hazmat scene, put it in there, bake it. Like, I got. Now,
when you were doing this, you were thinking really about your own household too, though, right? I mean, interrupting a little bit, but you were like, because if you're like me, you were thinking, well, shit, I better know how to re-sterilize my own mask just in case.
Yep. But my point is, in the space of 2 weeks, the fire department came like 10 years of progress. All the schooling that's online now, right? Like, in a changeover that would have taken the school boards 10 years to go fully online, they did in like 20 days. Same's true in medicine, right? There's stuff being published now. And if you have a trial that you want to do on hydroxychloroquine, you can do it now. You don't have to go to an ethics. You might have to go to an ethics board, and they're going to rubber stamp it. And so there have been tests coming out. There have been, proper randomized controlled studies coming out, and basically they've been showing no effect of hydroxychloroquine, and some of them have even been stopped because of the effects on the heart. Now, maybe you're fine because you're reasonably healthy, but somebody who's already sick and is already, and I'm talking outside my I'm not a doctor, but possibly something that's okay on a normal human being isn't going to be okay on somebody who's really legitimately quite sick. So as the data is coming out, it's not, and I would totally change my mind in a heartbeat if there was a giant study that was properly done, or a couple smaller ones that showed that hydroxychloroquine plus AZT plus ABC plus zinc plus magnesium had an effect. Like, I'm not tied to it. It's just
you and I hate snake oil, don't we? You and I both hate snake oil, fake news, and hysteria. That's the problem.
I think that's fair. I mean, look, when I was dying of kidney failure about 6 years ago, like the temptation to reach out and try this herb because some naturopath says this is good for the kidney, or reaching and going to some study that was done on rats in China. Now, I went to my nephrologist. I said, well, what about this study? He's like, it's rats. Right. It's in China. I'm going to not a human being
now, and I know just how to do it. What are you taking prophylactically? What's your regimen? You're doing something. You're too smart a guy not to be doing something prophylactically.
Oh, right now?
Yeah.
Vitamin C, vitamin D. That's it.
Yeah, me too. Me too. And I'm taking 25 milligrams of zinc and a zinc ionophore, just in case.
Yeah, it may. I mean, those things are barely. I mean, it's not quite true in my case. I am on. I've had a kidney transplant. If you take zinc and stuff at the wrong time, you can screw up your kidney transplant medication.
Did you really have a kidney transplant?
Sorry?
You only got one, and you got somebody else's kidney?
I got somebody else's kidney. I got my brother's kidney.
Yeah, man. Holy shit. Look at you.
Yeah, I'm lucky to be alive. 50 years ago, I'm dead. 100 years ago, I'm dead.
Yeah.
1,000 years ago, I'm dead.
That's if I'm born in a village, right
you better born in a village in Pakistan, I'm dead.
Yeah.
So I'm alive now.
You better send that brother a Christmas gift or something.
He's gotten a few.
That's good.
Well, Steve, but my point is, I understand the desperation of people who are looking for a cure, because I was there. Like, and you're just, the temptation to throw out science and go, what do I have to lose, is very strong. And in the end, I did try some things, like when I'm down at 15% kidney function and I'm looking at a transplant, really at that point, I have nothing to lose, right? Like,
right.
I take this shit and it knocks out my remaining kidney function. Well, guess what? I'll need a transplant a month earlier. So, right. But I'm
so glad you're here. I don't even know what to say. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah.
I spent a lot of kidney problem. I didn't get a transplant. What's that?
I spent a lot of quality time in hospitals.
Yeah, me too. The garden of the mind.
But yeah, I think as the data comes out, there is no recent convincing data that I'm aware of that it works, and there's in fact data showing that HCQ doesn't work and that it causes more harm than good. And I'll pivot on a dime if more data comes out, but it has to be good data. It can't just be anecdotal, a friend of mine was dying and got cured, because 99% of people would have been cured.
But you're looking
looks
for
like he's about to jump in here as we're going down.
Could take years. I mean, you're looking for a gold standard study.
These studies are already coming out. They're already out. There are already, and this was like a month ago. So my point is, stuff's coming through so much faster now. Like RxIV, are you familiar with that? It's a preprint server that shares data that comes out before it's been peer reviewed and before it's been published. So you got to take it with a huge grain of salt, because you and I could come up with a paper tonight and submit it, and they would rightfully say, it would never get published, but we can still put it on there. So it does need to be taken with a grain of salt, but that has speeded up the information curve so much.
I guess my point is, so as some people are taking that regimen prophylactically, hopefully with some zinc, but with the Z-Pack, either way, I suppose, would you really advise them not to take it early?
Are we talking prophylactic, or are we talking use in...
You got infection, take it early, just in case.
HCQ?
Yeah.
I would not take... No, because the data actually shows that if anything, it has a negative effect. That is what the studies... That's what the only... I think they were double-blinded, but they were certainly randomized trials are shown so far. It's understandable that people thought it might work initially, but now prophylactically, that's a whole other story. I'm not familiar with any studies showing that it works or doesn't work prophylactically before you get it.
No, I'm saying, like, if you got infected, you'd want to take it right away.
100. Not until the data's there. I really wouldn't. I've asked myself this because it's an obvious question. Like, hey, Kesting, you're anti this. What about if you got sick? No way, because the data now shows that I'm aware of.
Well, what would you take instead?
I would do the standard of care at the hospital, and I might add vitamin C because there's probably no downside to it.
Yeah, I'd add some vitamin C too. I agree with that.
I think that's hard to argue with, although you'd have to tell your doctors, because God knows medications get so complicated. If they got you on 5 other medications,
if they said you needed a ventilator, you wouldn't do that, would you?
I'm sorry?
If they said you need a ventilator now, you wouldn't be in a rush to do that.
I think the medical understanding has come a long way, as opposed to slamming everyone on a ventilator. And this is not an area I followed. I know initially it was like ventilators. I bet there's still a use for ventilators, just a lot later in the cycle, and waiting on intubation as well as long as possible.
I got to tell you.
Sorry, we've got a question from the peanut gallery, and I figure those are the first things I'm going to bring on. For starters, we have John Habeneck. He's asking ideas on the gentleman from Florida. That is Professor Bill Murphy, literally a professor, not just a jiu-jitsu professor, but he's also a jiu-jitsu professor. We've also got a question from Dan Silvert. Dan Silvert is saying, "Evening, fellas. Stephan," and I'm going to go ahead and just panel this question to both of you. What do you think of the contention that COVID-19 deaths are potentially overreported when the virus is, quote, comorbid, which people who have other chronic or acute conditions which may have primary causality? So Stephen, one thing I'm noticing just by looking at
this one.
Yeah.
So the thing is, because my PhD is in data science and I got 2 master's degrees in subdiscipline, we do see data reporting challenges, and data gets over-reported and under-reported. And a lot of people tend in the U.S. to misquote the CDC guidelines, which are actually fairly specific if you actually read the documents. And the truth is, there's also a time lag. We rely on estimates until we can get the final death certificates reviewed. And that means we won't know March's numbers, the official numbers, until June. We won't know April's numbers until July. So there is over-reporting and there is under-reporting. In some municipalities, like there's a rumor with Belgium that anything where there's a COVID-19, they're saying, yeah, it's COVID-19. And, with the U.S., the CDC has given some fairly specific guidelines. So over-reporting and under-reporting does occur. We also hear rumors. What about the people that say, well, you get more money if it's COVID? And yes, Medicare does pay a 20% premium. If there's a COVID-19 patient, Medicare fraud always does occur to some degree. but not all people are Medicare thieves. Most people are fairly honest. And if you had to ask me if I was a betting man and I got my magic 8 ball, my own personal fortune, I would bet that the deaths from all causes, included COVID-19, are underreported right now. Underreported.
We're going to agree on something. I think basically everything you said, I'm going to add 2 things to that, if I may. For sure, there's potential over-reporting. And I don't think anybody sort of on the science side of this ever denies this, right? Like every paper I look at says about the problem with over-reporting and the problem with under-reporting. And there are ways to get around that and take a look at different criteria. One compelling argument for underreporting, meaning that there's actually more deaths from COVID, is a whole excess deaths statistic, where they take a look at how many people die in an average month of April in New York City, right? Again, I'm making these numbers up. Let's say in an average month in New York City, 1,000 people die. And then last month, 1,500 people died, but only 300 people died of COVID. So these numbers don't make any sense. Forget I said New York City. But there's 200 deaths above average, right? There's 200 deaths that are not explained that just came up. Now, it's true. Maybe those are suicides, people who've lost their jobs. Maybe those are opiate overdoses, people staying at home. But those excess deaths started happening pretty soon after COVID. You would think before the economic impacts of this really hit home. So that's a pretty good indicator that at least in some places there's big underreporting. And secondly, when it comes to that, you get paid more for COVID patients. I'm sure that's happened. I'm sure that some hospital somewhere goes, we've hit the pile of gold here at the end of the rainbow. But number one, they could be audited for that, and I'm sure the federal government takes a pretty dim view of people stealing their money. And number two, I'm sure they get paid more for a gunshot wound than a nosebleed as well. But you don't see that many accusations of them turning nosebleed patients into gunshot wound patients just because it pays more money. I'm sure some of that happens, but I mean the professional liability and the liability of the hospital is pretty high if they're doing that.
Yeah, I would guess, and this is just a guess, it's an 8 ball. It's magic 8 balls, but we'll end up finding like the New York City death numbers from all causes were 2 to 3 times what we thought they were. I mean, these were not going to be good months for the U.S. That being said, Stephen, the media, and I'm in academia. We've done a miserable job. I actually am a government consultant. We've done a very poor job in government of informing the public. In academia, it's publish or perish, and a lot of junk gets published. In the media, Jesus, they're tabloids now. Now, I'm going to redirect the conversation a little bit, not to be tinfoil hat, but because we have to address the issue. In the U.S., there is the question of civil liberties versus infection control. Now, I'm going to take the example of Canada. It is a little ironic Trudeau just ordered a gun seizure in the same time space, so there is a little bit of concern. Oh,
are we linking the gun thing to the COVID thing?
It's a question of government control versus civil liberties.
No, that's because we had
the guns. He said you got 2 years to give back your rifles.
Sure. I think there's a more parsimonious explanation that there was a mass shooting here with an assault rifle, whatever an assault rifle means, and we take a pretty dim view of mass shootings, and there's no Second Amendment lobby here, really. But I think the whole idea of government oversight is the more interesting question is one related to COVID. And that's the whole idea of contact tracing. The reason that places like South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Hong Kong, even China have done fairly well is because you put an app on your phone, and that app traces you everywhere. And if you turn off your phone, when you're supposed to be in quarantine, the police come and knock at your door and say, why have you turned your phone off?
India just announced it's mandatory, as a matter of fact.
Yeah. So the intrusion on, and you can't tell me that's not going to be used for something else. Like once a government gets a tool, it never gives it up, right? Like, I mean, Dan Carlin has talked about how RICO was a special set of rules brought in to fight just the mafia. This is only for the mafia. Normal tools can't be used against the mafia. We need special powers. And now if you and I are talking about robbing a liquor store, then it's a conspiracy. We're a criminal organization, I'm going to drop RICO on your head. So I get it. Fortunately, there are other ways to do contact tracing. British Columbia, where I live, has done a really good job of flattening the curve, almost crushing the curve.
How do you know it's not random? Because Florida is opening up right now. We've had good results, but how do we know our results aren't random? Maryland results are terrible. Florida results are good. Yeah. How do we know it's not random?
People are still analyzing the Spanish flu outbreak that was more than 100 years ago. People are still learning new things about tuberculosis dynamics in society. We'll be figuring out what the hell happened with COVID for the next 100 years. There's a lot of data here. Why is it bigger in one place than another? In Canada, Quebec and Ontario got hit really hard, right? Like the Montreal, where I used to live, it's a reasonably smallish city compared to a lot of American cities. They're having like a
lot of New York spillover, right?
Okay, so maybe it's spillover. Maybe it's a different strain of the virus, right? Maybe it's a European virus versus the Asian variation of the virus.
Strain theory, because wouldn't that be nice if we had a less pernicious strain and a more pernicious strain, and the less pernicious strain gave us immunity to the more pernicious strain? Wouldn't that be like smallpox? Wouldn't that be a great outcome?
That would be awesome. And the geneticists, the viral geneticists are working really hard on this right now. I mean, there's the two big clades, and then there's a whole bunch of sub families and sub variations. And I mean, it's an RNA-based virus. They mutate fast. It's part of the reason why. So it might be getting more infectious. Maybe it's getting less deadly. Who the hell knows? But maybe that's why New York got hit so hard. Maybe that's why parts of United States are getting off relatively easy. We don't know. Maybe it's just further behind. Like maybe a population of infected people got started really early in January in New York, and it spread asymptomatically for a long time.
I got the flu in February, and I got the antibody test. It came back negative. I was very disappointed about that. I said, shit, I hit the lottery.
Well, the antibody tests have got pretty high false negatives and false positives.
Oh, yeah. The Bayes rule is a bitch. Ema, I want you to take note how skillfully Stephan, as a black belt in debate, avoided the controversy of the gun grab in Canada. He went...
You know what? Okay, now, I'm a gun owner. I've carried guns. And I have not done enough research about this particular issue to really have an opinion. They're not stealing all guns. They're not stealing all rifles. I'm fairly secure the next time I go to the Arctic for my next solo canoe trip or whatever the hell that is, I'll be able to take my 12 gauge. Will I be able to take my my rifle, my automatic rifle or semi-automatic rifle with a 15-round chamber or 15-round magazine? Probably not, which I don't have one. But I've not done enough research on this. There's all kinds of people making very strong statements about how this is not legal. It is legal. It was done under this. It was done under that. I don't know. I have not done the research. I've been more than
very deftly avoided. That's all I can say is I was impressed by it. Go ahead, Ian.
Gentlemen, I'd like to ask about the mask issue. That's a very hot topic, a hot button issue right now. Back at the beginning of the outbreak, everybody was told that masks won't do anything for this, to not wear masks.
I wear my mask for Stephan. He wears this mask for me.
Right. But the question is CO2, self-infection. I've read some data that says that
there's a lot of cut and paste. There's a lot of cut and paste.
Right.
List of 12 objections, and somehow, and I don't know how this happened, masks became politicized. Mm-hmm. If you wear a mask, it's basically following Republican Democratic lines, right? Like maybe there's some other fissure or other divide in society along which mask wearing is become a political issue. I don't doubt that if I went someplace in the States that people would get really, really mad at me for wearing a mask. Honestly, maybe that's the reason why Vancouver wasn't hit hard by the virus, because there's a lot of Asians here, fresh off the boat Asians, and mask wearing is more normalized in Vancouver than it is anywhere else in Canada. So let
me ask you this. Should we be concerned that worldwide a lot of the antibiotic sourcing is done in China?
Oh, for sure. 100%. Yeah. As the trade war heats up, like, how's this for a World War III scenario? Trump says something against China. China says, okay, screw you. You're not getting any antibiotics for anything. And then Americans start dying, not to do with COVID. They start dying from, I don't know, infected toenails.
And Canadians too, potentially.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
Depends what the reach is.
For sure. So But with regards to the masks, number one, the first reason I wear is to protect you, right? Like it's not debatable. If I cough into a mask or into a t-shirt or something, the small particulates travel much less further. There's smaller and larger particulates. If you're like, I don't have any particulates, well, go outside in a cold day. That fog that forms around you when you breathe out and drifts downwind, that's particulates. So anyone who's ever been in like freezing temperatures knows exactly how big their particulate cloud is. So I wear that mask to protect you, and if we all just wore it, even if it doesn't protect me at all, if you wear one to protect me, I wear one to protect you, we're all good. And I would love to see what that did to the viral reproduction numbers. I'm guessing, and this is the point is, and in terms of like coming out of lockdown, in terms of coming out of like flattening the curve, honestly, I wonder if we just all wore masks and washed our hands and didn't do really dumb things, if that would be enough to keep the R naught less than 1.
Like
and just
grappling.
Watch this thing. Yeah, that's like, here I am.
The only person that's still not grappling that is jealous of all the motherfuckers that are saying they are.
I'm just mad because the more of those motherfuckers are grappling, the longer I'm gonna have to wait till I can grapple.
Yeah, I don't want to get my parents sick, so I'm like, I want to do it, but I'm like, I just talked to my wife. I said maybe I should quarantine myself in my barn. I just go live my life. I just live in the barn. I live away from you guys.
Train your wife to be a grappler.
No, at 25 years, Stephen, it don't work.
No, you get a special COVID card.
Yeah,
you can invoke it there.
So I do want to talk about that a little bit.
But in terms of masks protecting you, there is some good research out there that even shitty masks give you some measure of protection. I mean, I've worn masks for hours, talked to the doctors, the nurses who are wearing N95s or surgical masks for hours in the hospital setting. How many times did you pass out when you're doing brain surgery? You're wearing a mask, presumably. Man, your oxygen levels must have been half. Your SpO2 must have gone down like 50%.
I don't know.
You woke up on the floor.
Not to contaminate the sterile field. That was my big thing. Like, I don't want to be the guy that contaminates the sterile field.
but you were fine. Like they're uncomfortable. But did you ever pass out from them?
No, but when I was a leukemia patient, I did one time throw up in a mask, and it enveloped my whole head.
Okay. So fair enough. When you're shopping as a leukemia patient, rolling your hospital bed around the supermarket, be careful with wearing masks. But there's a. I was just looking at the efficacy of particulate filtering by various homemade masks. Again, MedRxiv had a preprint document on it. And some of it's only 30%. I'll take 30%. N95s are pretty good.
God bless you. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. N95s are reasonably good at protecting you. Now, conspiracy theory. Why did they say they won't protect you? Well, did they say that, or did they say something that's similar but means a very different thing, especially to someone with scientific training? If they say there's no evidence that it protects you, that's a big difference between saying there's no evidence that it protects you versus there's evidence that it doesn't protect you. This thing, one is just saying we don't know. We don't have anything to say it does or it doesn't. And the other is saying it absolutely doesn't.
Well, Stephen, you're being a very good scientific sheepdog, and you're being a very good leader for the community. But as a human being, guys like you and me, you only got one kidney. It was from your brother. Yeah. And I'm a leukemia patient with scarred lungs. Do you think we should want the chicken pox opportunity, the party? Do you think like you and I should want, well, let's just get the infection and see what happens? Or should we wait?
I think I'm not speaking for myself here. When I'm saying like shut down jiu-jitsu, I'm not speaking for myself. I'm pretty good at protecting myself. I'm going to be careful. I am wearing a mask when I go out in public. I am taking lots of steps. I think there's a reasonably good chance I make it through till there's a vaccine or a good treatment. So none of this applies to me, or most of what I'm saying doesn't apply to me. It applies to the jiu-jitsu community as a whole, right? Like all these people opening up.
Personally, though, haven't you had any madness? I mean, 2 months, 3 months, weren't there at least a couple days of madness?
If you've been doing jiu-jitsu as long as I have, there have inevitably been layoffs along the way, right? Injuries, sure. Breaking legs, ending up in the hospital, family things. So long canoe trips. So I think I'm better adapted to longer layoffs. I mean, it's only been a few months. Fucking talk to me in a year, and it'll be a different story.
Over the past 2 months, I had about 4 days, two days per month of madness, where I had severely depressed. I had to get over it.
I'm severely depressed by the quality of the lack of civility on Facebook. That's the big thing. That's the.
Isn't it mad? I'm in an interagency brief every day where the hospital ICUs call in, and then I hear these yahoos on Facebook saying, people don't die or young people don't die. And it's like a Jewish clothes tearing event. I'm like, it breaks my heart because I'm like, no, I just talked to the guy. He died. It's hard to hear.
It's a weird thing that the outside world doesn't exist, right? Maybe it's part of flat Earth theory. There is no China, there is no Mexico, there is no Iran, there is no Wuhan, there is no Sao Paulo. These places don't really exist, and if they exist, they're different. We're special here. Your DNA, I'm their DNA. I'm human, they're human. I mean, there are genetic differences in how you respond to this thing. The two that I've seen is the blood type. Yeah. And then somebody did a study on ApoE4, which is a gene in your body that has to do with Alzheimer's and heart attack and stuff. So, there are definitely genetic bases for susceptibility.
The big thing that disturbs me, and I'm American, so we interrupt. I'm sorry, we're rude. I apologize. We're culturally inferior. Is we can't connect the dots.
We let you interrupt.
Well, there you go. But you're a good guy. We can't connect the dots between the people that present with hypoxia but normally presenting lungs, and then they have these weird blood anomalies or neurological anomalies. They end up with a glassy signature. It looks like autoimmune or some type of heavy metal poisoning. If we could figure that out, we could have treatments. We don't have that. We don't have vaccines. We're still developing our polypharmacy. If we were a little bit further along on that, I'd be a little more optimistic. As of right now, I'm not training because I don't want to kill my parents. It's,
Oh. Well, I mean, the fastest we've ever developed a vaccine was, I think, 4 years, right? Was that mumps? I think that was mumps. But we also didn't throw 100 million scientists at it. We also didn't turn the entire nation of China onto it. I mean, yes, they're lying. Yes, they've got external and internal political reasons for lying about everything. But I guarantee you they're working on this problem because they shut down their whole bloody economy to deal with it initially. And that's ultimately my bottom line argument. When I was going back and forth on this initially, like, is this a real thing? Is this not a real thing? The thought that actually tipped me over and still continues to tip me over is, man, the Chinese, they know their math, right? Like, the country is run by engineers. That country is run by people who, it's not my quote, but they understand what an exponential growth curve looks like. They understand that 1 goes to 2, 2 goes to 4, 4 goes to 8, 8 goes to 16, and then all hell breaks loose, right? It doesn't continue at a linear thing. It's an exponential thing. And the fact that the Chinese economy is sacred, right? They're willing to sacrifice anything. They're willing to sacrifice the quality of the water, the visuals, the environment, individual freedoms for their economy, and they shut that bastard down. And they
didn't have a second spike, as a matter of fact.
I think the second spike is outside of Wuhan. I think it's in the north. It's in northern China.
A second spike is a second spike.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but okay. This is the scary part.
It's a municipal disease.
This is the scary part. If you had a choice, you had to bet on one of two countries. One, everyone's allowed to have an opinion. Everyone thinks they're allowed to do their own thing. They feel entitled to argue with you, with the government. They're entitled to undermine the steps and circumvent the steps of the government, otherwise known as democracy. And on the other side, we've got an authoritarian government where if you disagree with them, you disappear, or your organs end up for sale, and you can weld people into apartment buildings if the apartment building is infected. One's a dystopia, but if you had to place your money on which would handle a viral outbreak better, which one would you put your money on?
The old dictatorship, the trains run on time argument.
Yeah. And you have the power to quell dissent and to prevent people from, storming state capitol buildings.
So are you asking which population would have a better chance of surviving a warfare with an alien species of which a virus certainly qualifies?
Are we talking about the whole turnkey totalitarianism thing? If a giant asteroid was heading for Earth, I think that would be a lot simpler to deal with here, because whatever we do happens out there in space, right? We're going to nuke it. We're going to push it. We're going to try and move Earth. We're going to build a shield around Earth, right? I mean, it happens out
virus
there.
Happens here.
Yeah, exactly. And presumably a lot of people are just absolutely scared shitless because their economy, their own personal economy, their family economy, how they pay the bills is threatened. And I mean, this is one of the rants I've probably gone on most often on social media, that it's this idea of it's jobs versus lives, right? It's the economy versus saving lives. I think that's a false dichotomy. I think that's a false choice. It's like,
I'm not sure that it is, Stephen.
I'm gonna have to disagree with you.
Okay. Well, here's my logic, and then please tear it apart.
But I love hugs. You know, maybe I'm wrong. I stand corrected. I stand there often.
Yeah. Well, here's my logic. Tell me how I'm wrong. If we open everything up and everything magically went back to the way it was in early January, and everyone's going to the movie theaters, everyone's doing jiu-jitsu, everyone's going to restaurants, and I think that's a big if, because the reality is people wouldn't immediately go back to that. But let's say they do, and this virus really, really gets a hold, and every city ends up looking like Milan, every city ends up looking like Sao Paulo, every city ends up looking like Quebec, like Montreal, every city ends up looking like New York City. And then people start dying, and there has to be second shutdowns to get everything back under control. You're extending the pain. You're extending the pain from a couple of months to...
Aren't you really speaking to a moral issue?
No, I'm saying lives versus lives. I have no doubt that if the economy takes a giant shit, that costs lives.
Because you heard that there's a bee crisis, right? You've heard this narrative. There's a bee crisis. The bees are dying, right?
Yeah.
Well, when I heard that crisis, you're a very interesting guy. You're very red. I don't know about you, but I'm a hands-on type of guy. So I went out and got 600 beehives and grew it up even further than that. And the first year I had like 50% loss or 80% loss. But a Horace Bell, an 80-year-old beekeeper, said, don't pollinate the crops and just let the bees breed wild. And don't treat them with chemicals. Let the weak ones die off. And by year 3, I was sustainable. So there was never a bee crisis. There was never a bee crisis. There was a commercial beekeeper crisis. They trucked the bees from here to there. They put it in the artificial equipment. There's neonicotinoid pesticides. They inseminate their bees to breed docile bees, and there's invasive pests because of the global economy. But you let the bees breed wild. You let the weak ones die off. Now, this is a horrible moral dilemma, though, because humans were meant to have some plagues and we're meant to have some shocks. And we want to oppose this. But on the other hand, you can't beat Mother Nature.
So far, I agree with you. You've reached the limit. Like everything you said about bees, I've heard. I don't think I've heard much more than that. So, but my point is that if the economy collapses, we lose lives, right? People kill themselves. People won't be able to afford medical care, especially in the States. People, I mean, it's quite likely that a global depression will cost lives, right? So it's not
just accelerate those suicides though, and isn't that also the counter argument with the virus? So like by flattening the curve, we're just slowing the pace of the deaths. So we have ICU utilization.
Yep, sure.
So I would like to just throw something in there for you. Okay. If you look at the overall response,
Ronnie, come.
You can't stop people from getting food, right? Like we still have to get our food from somewhere. Sure. There are still going to be people making that food.
Sure.
And those people have to go to work. They have to get up. There's still these quote unquote essential workers. So it's going to spread in perpetuity. There's until we have a vaccine. Okay. Do you see a way to guarantee that I won't touch something that somebody else touched and touch my hands?
Zero guarantees.
Right.
Just zero. But I think this open versus closed is also a false dichotomy. Open up, close down. Nobody's saying close down forever. Nobody's saying, nobody on the side of science really is saying.
Don't you agree? This is a municipal problem. It's not a state problem or a province problem or a national problem. You have to look at each municipality as to their circumstance and their numbers.
Yeah, my tendency there is that the federal government should, and this is based on my understanding of Canadian politics, that really, yes, it has to be managed on a sort of municipal, regional, jurisdictional, somewhere between the size of a city and the size of a state, right? Like in there, some like a greater metropolitan area, depending on the amount of travel that's going on. But we can't have 50 individual or 10 individual provincial solutions, 50 individual state solutions, or I don't know, 10,000 individual city solutions.
Stephen, God love you. I'm going to interrupt, and I apologize, but I might disagree because it seems to be a municipal problem where we can't have the policies of New York City be the policies for, say, backwoods Florida,
sure.
And maybe Miami is more locked down, high port traffic.
I don't. My point about the open versus closed being a false choice is there are many degrees of closed. Like British Columbia, which managed the explosion quite well so far, we were never fully locked down.
How do you know it wasn't random chance, though?
Of course. We don't know if it's like. Believe me, I'm a big fan of fooled by randomness.
Yeah. So if we were to flip a fair coin 1,000 times and it came up heads, is it a fair coin?
No.
It all depends if we're flipping it 1 billion times or not. We'll see strings of that all the time.
Yeah. I agree. But there's many shades of being closed and being open, right? How much to be closed? I don't know. Nobody knows.
Neither do I.
What we're pursuing up here right now, and it seems like the reasonable strategy, is we've opened things up a little bit, and then we're going to pause, and we'll see how the numbers respond, and then we'll either move forwards or backwards. That seems like quite a reasonable strategy.
Grappling, should he feel like a piece of shit? That's what Emil wants to know. If he goes back and grapples right now, should he feel like a piece of shit?
We got a question here in the comments that kind of relates to that, and I'd like to throw this out there, and that'll kind of answer the question that you're asking.
Not only that, Stephan, what do you think about Emil's haircut? It's a major Jufro. He needs to clip that shit up.
Hey, neither one of you guys can grow a Jufro, so
I know. I got no hair on the top. I look like a monk. It's a tonsure.
So anyways, the question is from Dan Silvert. Any thoughts, sociology, policy, health, whatever, on Tanner Rice and others opening against state guidelines, especially when their gyms are in rural/low case number areas?
Okay.
Stephan, I'll let you go first.
Okay. I really don't think that we can like this whole I'll make my decisions and you'll make your decisions thing, I think is the wrong approach for something that's a problem for all of society. I'll make my own decisions when it comes to rock climbing. I'll make my own decisions when it comes to going on an Arctic canoe trip up to Hudson Bay. I'll make my own decisions, maybe even for putting a seatbelt on, because if I screw up, I kill only myself. So I think that this whole idea of I make decisions for me, you make decisions for you. The analogy that I've used before is it's kind of ludicrous. It's a little bit like somebody during the Blitz when the Germans were bombing the shit out of London, England, and there were blackouts. You had to put curtains up. You couldn't have lights up on. For somebody to go, I think this German thing is overrated. I'm going to light up my house. I'm going to put lights in my backyard. I'm going to have a big tiki candle or tiki torch party. And you do you. I'm going to do me. And of course, the bombers would come over, they'd see a spot of light, and they'd drop a shit ton of bombs. And probably none of them would hit the guy with the tiki torches. There are certain problems where it's an individual choice. My choice to do jiu-jitsu, my choice if I want to go do MMA, probably I'm only going to hurt myself. I'm unlikely to kill somebody in the audience. I'm unlikely to kill the ref. So that's number one. Number two, if it's not just your own choice, then somebody has to be in charge. And presumably that's your municipality, it's your state government, it's your federal government. Somebody has to be making choices for everybody. And that's something that's going to be more effective than others. For school owners thinking about opening up, if the argument for you taking care of society isn't good enough for you, if the argument of you not wanting to be in contravention of guidelines and getting fined or getting jail time isn't enough for you, you probably hate regulation. If you don't like people telling you what to do, you probably hate regulation. You know who also hated regulation? Restaurants. A long time ago. Restaurants probably just wanted to cook whatever the hell they wanted with whatever, whatever sanitary facilities they had. And enough people died of food poisoning that now there's food inspectors and there's, a ton of you want to open a restaurant? Good luck. It's a ton of regulations. I think we're going to end up seeing jiu-jitsu regulated because of people who hate regulation going against going against saying, hey, stay shut for now. You're not part of phase 2, or you're not part of phase 3. You're part of phase 7. If there's an 8 phase thing, or you're not now, in any case. And people going against that, they're going to end up bringing regulation down on all our asses. And soon you will, just imagine the person that you hate most in jiu-jitsu, that one guy who is a total asshole. If he gets in front of the right people and says, hey, you know what? I think Missouri needs a regulatory commission for jiu-jitsu, and he hobnobs with the right guy. The guy that you hate most is going to be in charge of the regulatory agency, running it for the whole state, and you're going to have to kowtow to him.
Well, except to the appeal to fear for fascism, I agree with everything Stephan said, and I thought it was very eloquently said and very, very profoundly intelligent and logical. What I would say is, if in your, and I'm going to give a counterpoint with Stephan's permission, if in your rural area,
not granted.
Thank you. If in your rural situation, your numbers are low and your IC utilization is at an acceptable margin, and you choose to take a gamble, and the statewide or federal policies are nonsensical, you got to make a call, because there's some other conflicts of interest in the system regarding state and federal money. And I'm not advocating everybody make a free-for-all. I would just wish, and the problem is we have a lot of lay people and they watch the craziest news sources. But all that being said, I just wish everybody could take reasonable precautions. Like Stephan said in the beginning, wash your hands, take the temps. If the numbers in your area are going up, you scale back. If the numbers in your area are going down, you take a little more risk. Unfortunately, everybody doesn't have that discipline, and they just say anarchy. Self-interest, pleasure of the moment. But if you're data-driven and you watch the numbers, you could do a little bit better than the government, because the government, and I'm a government contractor and consultant, we're not that damn good. That's why I actually ordered a Magic 8-Ball from Amazon, and when I go in these government interagency briefings, I got 3 other statisticians to the left of me and 6 epidemiologists to the right of me. I now shake the Magic 8-Ball and say, outcome is unclear every time they put up a projection.
Well, I mean, think of it this way. If you open up, and you're opening up, let's imagine 2 scenarios where you open up. Scenario 1, your state says it's okay to open up. You got to take this precaution, that precaution, the other precaution. You need this many hand sanitizer stations, and you need this much space per people sparring, right? 64 square feet or whatever. And somebody gets sick and dies, and there's an investigation. Either the family sues you,
or even about the investigation, the moral crisis. It's a terrible moral.
No, I'm now appealing to the people's pocketbooks.
Sure.
Right? If I'm running a cardboard box factory and one of my workers gets crushed inside a cardboard box making machine, there's going to be an investigation. There's going to be the work safety, OSHA, there's something like that.
About this. I mean, they'd like to get hit in the face, they'll die. All they got to their credit is some mats. They don't care about the financial thing. I mean, they got no sense of risk about that at all. I struggle with that every day.
Well, I mean, you don't have to be in that many lawsuits before you realize that even if a lawsuit is unsuccessful, it ruins your life. And the argument of Your Honor, I followed all the state guidelines, and I'm very, very sorry this person got sick, but I did follow the state guidelines, is a much better legal argument than, Your Honor, I watched this. I want to have everyone watch Plandemic. See, it's a total fake. I would think that legal option 1, I'm not a lawyer. I don't think there are any lawyers here, but I would think that I followed all the state guidelines is a better defense than, could you please watch Plandemic?
Well, as always, I would give a counter argument to Stephan. I would say that for each of you school owners with your students, if your student comes back and say, I got infected at the gym, we know we had a cluster at the gym, and I infected my parents and killed them. I mean,
but it may not be. It may be out of your hands, right? If you're in a small rural thing in Mississippi, and all of a sudden 5 people show up at the hospital, and some kind of contact tracing puts them all back at your gym, and you're in contravention of the Mississippi guidelines for reopening gyms, I don't know what they are, then it's not the fact that you get sued, it's the fact that you're breaking the law. And now you've got a full-on investigation on your ass.
I'll make a terrible confession to you. I put up $1,000 cash prize for a June 27 Fat Fuck tournament where all the school owners could come compete. But then I thought, yeah, we need to do like 14 days of temperature checks and all that stuff. No audience. But what if I brought all those school owners in and one was infected and they brought all the infections back to their schools and we killed a bunch of people? To me, this is a moral crisis. I'm not worried about being sued. I'm just worried about the moral crisis.
No.
Let me throw another idea to you. Let's say you put that $1,000 up 6 months ago before all this shit started, but it was during flu season, and it was there was one strain of the flu this year.
Just go back. It ain't the same. The flu is not the COVID. People keep saying
not, but it can still kill people.
No,
it's still capable of killing.
No, with the flu, we got vaccines, we got pharma treatments, we got Tamiflu.
There are strains of the flu that
can kill you're just saying this because I think you just entered the tournament. Didn't you just enter the tournament I'm talking about?
Maybe. But no, but here's the point that I'm making.
I'm trying to get Stephan to criticize me for putting up a tournament.
I wouldn't do it. I don't think it's a good idea. I think there's legal liability. I think there's moral liability. I think it's setting a bad example.
I think that's fair. Our idea was if the numbers in Florida were bad, then we push the deadline. But Stephan, I don't know what to do. I wanted to put something out there for hope because people are getting squirrely.
And the hope thing, man, here's some hope. I don't know how much longer we have, but I do want to throw out some hope. There's a lot of hope in testing, right? If you could have everybody competing
if they all had antibody positive test, no problem.
Yeah, like if there was I was reading something the other day. Senegal is developing antigen tests for $1, right? Basically, it's like a pregnancy test to see if you've got COVID going on. How accurate is it? I don't know. What's the false positive? I don't know. What's the false negative? I don't know. But let's say that we had something that was 99.5% effective at saying you spit on a Q-tip, put that Q-tip in a test tube, shake it. If it turns purple, you've got COVID and you don't know it. Something like that would be a huge game changer.
Yeah.
And if Senegal is working on this, hopefully somebody in North America, somebody in Germany, somebody in China, somebody in Canada, somebody in Australia is also working on this. And in fact, they are. So you could have your tournament, but the morning of, you got to go get swabbed or not the nasopharyngeal swabs that go to the back of your brainstem that Bill Gates is using to put chips in your brain, but just like you spit on a slide or whatever that test is, and if it turns purple, you can't compete and you got to go to the hospital or whatever. Fine. So I think as antigen testing comes along, so there's two main types of I'm going to mansplain this. You guys probably know this, but the people watching, you can test for whether you have the virus, or you can test to see if you have the antibodies and you've had the virus. Those are two different tests. Mm-hmm. It's unfortunate hand motions on the internet. So the antibody tests that say whether you've been exposed, they have been notoriously unregulated. There's a whole bunch of problems with them, and that helps create some of the stats that say 5% of Californians already had COVID. Well, if that test has a 4% false positive, then that doesn't really tell you much. So hopefully they're working that out. The other school of tests is do you have COVID? And so far, as Dr. Chris Moriarty, who's on my podcast, who did the opening up BJJ guidelines that I then published on Grapple Arts.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, they're pretty useful starting point, aren't they? Pointed out, the gold standard right now is real-time PCR, polymerase chain reaction. But you need a lab to do that. And it's not that fast, and it's really skilled work that you need a nurse who really knows what she's doing to stick that swab down your nose into the back of your head. But it's this antigen testing, which is more like a pregnancy kit, right? They allow people to do home pregnancy tests. Hey, can you pee on a stick? You can do this test. Can you spit on this stick? You can do this test. If that comes along, then we'll see jiu-jitsu return a lot faster, because it might be worth it to some school owners to say, hey, I got to raise your dues by $10 a month, but I'm going to do all the testing that you need right before class. Something like that.
Well, Stephan, all I can tell you is that you're a moral man and you're an educated man and you're acting with precision. And in my own circumstance, and you and I have been doing this a long time, and you're doing probably a better job of it than I am. I got a couple dozen black belts underneath me with their own schools. And my animals enter a ring because they're exercising their own demons. They've never been known for their intellect or their risk management. They've been known for being brave and often dumb. I'm just trying to get them to eat the donuts in the most reasonable manner because I know they're going to eat the donuts. So like I'm fighting for inches to be reasonable. And you're on the moral side, and I'm on the practical side, saying, look, I know you guys are going to do this, but maybe like just pick one study buddy for this month, and that's all you drill with. And we'll have a tournament, we'll push it. And I'm doing a lousy job, but I got to be honest with you. I'm just trying to get those guys to mitigate the risk a little bit because they're fucking dumb.
On a logical level. So for me, I'm looking at Ohio. I'm looking at Cleveland, Ohio. You were talking about a municipal problem. It's a municipal problem. Looking at what's going on in my state, they're reopening stuff right now. Actually, they reopened stuff last week. So that means if Stephan's misgivings about the COVID are valid for where I live, in about 2 weeks, things are going to start getting worse because there were a lot of open air.
There's a good chance as we go back to grappling, we're going to kill people.
There's a possibility, yeah.
No, there's a very good probability of it. On the other hand, now this is where I may differ from Stephan a little bit. Our guys are just going to do this. So like, how do we get them? Like, pick a study buddy just for the next month. Pick a study buddy. At least mitigate the risk that way.
You'll be happy to know that Chris Moriarty, the doctor with whom I did opening up BJJ, today sent me a revision to those guidelines, and that included for stage 3 the idea of a study buddy, right? Like one person that essentially you and I are going to be a pod. If I show up to class and you're not there, I don't train. Right. I don't train with somebody. And that way, if I have it, I at least only kill one, or I only infect one person.
One power node that could infect other people.
Yes. Yeah. That the idea of it's a network problem, right? Like you're connected to me, I'm connected to you, you're connected to your family and your coworkers. And
Stephan, I would say that with the people that are opening up, if they don't do that, they're being quite reckless. If you can't drive it down to not only limited cohorts, your Monday and Wednesday cohorts will be self-contained, never mixing with your Tuesday, Thursday cohorts. But if in those cohorts you don't have a study buddy that is preferably 12 to 13 feet, at least 6 feet away from everybody else, you're being awfully reckless.
Yeah, the new guidelines, I mean, for what they're worth, are 12 foot by 12 foot area that only you and one other person can do, and then when you guys leave, the gym gets cleaned, and then the next bunch of people come in. It's not the best solution.
And everybody takes their temperature every day. If you spike a fever, you don't train. We know this during flu season. It's especially true now.
Sure, that would make it safer. You may still be in contravention of state law. Like when I say it's not a municipal problem, I kind of mean it needs to have, like, imagine 4 municipalities, and 3 of them are governed by, let's call it, a reasonable appreciation for science and reason, and the fourth mayor is a huge plandemic fan. Right? Like that's a major problem. If those cities are, because then that city is fucked.
Well, email. I'll drive this down to a practical point. If I can make one message here.
So you need top-down control. And perhaps it's administered at a municipal level, right? Like presumably the further you go up, by the time you get to the CDC, the number of plandemic fans is lower at the CDC than in the general population. So now it's maybe administered at a municipal level, right? Like we look at the greater Cleveland area, maybe Cleveland plus 50 miles in all directions. I don't know. And you take steps locally there, right? Is Cleveland going up? Is Cleveland going down? Is community transmission stopped in Cleveland? So I agree. It's managed in municipal. Sorry, it's the actions occur at a municipal level, but I think you need top-down control for something like this, because you can't have, how many mayors are there in North America? I'm gonna guess.
Even in Puerto Rico, there's like 100. Yeah. So, Email, what I'm saying is, because Stephan's addressing a macro issue and he's being philosophical and he's correct, he's morally correct and all that. But I'm saying to you, as a Jew for wearing knucklehead, for the next month, pick a study. If you got to eat the donut, pick a study buddy and encourage your peers. Pick a study buddy. 12-foot of distance. Take your temperatures every day. Don't break that protocol for the next month. If we can hold out another month, we buy another month for vaccine progress, for polypharmacy progress, for testing progress. If we can just hold another month, where if we're going to eat the donut and we can't keep our people from eating the donut, pick a study buddy, 12-foot by 12-foot, take the temperatures, open the bay doors. We know you're going to do it anyway, but we all know we're all dumbasses here. Everybody on this call is a dumbass because we like to be punched in the face. Even Stephan, as noble as he is, he's got one kid and we still grab one.
But my whole thing, what I've been doing this entire time, like at the beginning, I just didn't train. Then I had my one study buddy that was local, but we kind of felt like because we both lived in the Cleveland area that it was a bit risky. Then I found a study buddy out in like the boondocks, like out,
right
out in the middle of nowhere. And I drive out to his house about an hour away from me.
I'm not saying that's right, but what I'm saying is if we can do your part and encourage your peers to do your part to mitigate the risk. We know they're going to be idiots, but mitigate the risk.
So we've got a question from Rocco Maurer, which I feel like really kind of touches on all this. Specifically, he's talking about Sweden. How do you feel about Sweden's response to COVID-19? Why can't people under the age of 65 without comorbidities go on with their life as usual and have people with comorbidities or over the age of 65 shelter in place? Isn't it accurate that healthy people between the age of 18 to 45 are virtually safe from COVID-19?
None of that's accurate. And I'm going to address this first, and I'll let Stephan keep it up with it. So the first thing is Sweden's numbers have been horrible. They've been horrible. They're paying a short-term ante and hoping their medium and long-term ante pays off. We don't know how that's going to turn out yet. That's the first thing. The second thing is what nobody is talking about, what we're doing a lousy job of talking about, are the people that survive with ruined lungs, and I've got ruined lungs from chemotherapy, and the people that survived that were young people that had strokes or other problems. Now, what we can say is exercise reasonable precautions, but it's grossly irresponsible to say that young people don't die from this virus or that they don't have outcomes that may not be fatal, but may affect their quality of life for a long time. Stephan, I turn it over to you after that.
No, I agree. I mean, obviously, if you had the choice of catching COVID and being 80 years old versus 40 years old, you'd choose 40. There's no debate there. But there's also, maybe that's where those excess deaths that we talked about earlier are coming from, right? People in their 40s dropping dead of heart attacks and strokes versus, classic COVID symptoms. And you're right. Like if you do survive it, we don't yet know the long-term effects, but your lungs are, if it presents in the lungs, your lungs are pretty screwed for at least a while, right? Perhaps a lot longer than that. Sweden, it's really interesting. I'm glad Sweden's doing that experiment from a selfish point of view. Man, I'm hoping that we sort of find a way to lower the R0 long enough to keep these numbers low until there's some kind of vaccine. That doesn't mean stay locked up until there's a vaccine. It might be as simple as wear masks when you're out in public until there's a vaccine. Would that be a price worth paying to stop your? Sure. And finally, with regards to this whole, the 65-year-olds and older, they can shelter in place. Oh, okay, great. Let's take my dad. He's 82. He's in a nursing home. He's not being tended to by people who are 85. He's being tended to by people, mostly immigrants, who are sort of 25, 30, 40, who go home and interact with their own kids. And so to say that we can magically wall off this population of 65-year-olds and keep them safe, it's just not true. Those 65-year-olds have to interact with the rest of society. If they're really old.
The fact is, Sweden has a social program burden. They've had an ongoing immigrant population burden. The bulk of the deaths are those that tax the social programs most severely. And I'm not saying they're doing this to lessen their social program benefit impact, but there's a large contingent in Sweden, not the majority contingent, certainly, that'll say, it's going to be the immigrants. It's going to be the old people. This is who's costing us the most money. So what I'm saying is Sweden took a bet. It's very controversial. We'll have to see how it works out. Yeah. However, we have to look at all the bets, not just one.
In essence, we are doing the Sweden experiment. The United States, as far as I can tell, is doing a Sweden experiment. They're just not calling it that because there's people who are opening up. There's people who are sick and tired of lockdown. There's people who are openly rebelling.
Experiment now. Florida is entirely the Sweden experiment.
Yeah, but what happens in Florida doesn't stay in Florida. Like, people are going to go to Florida for summer vacation or something, and then they're going to go back.
I agree.
Like, there's mixing within those borders, and you don't need a giant initial inoculation to have it skyrocket in, I don't know, Tacoma, Washington. If 5 people come from Florida to Tacoma, and 4 of them are like, that's plenty with this incubation time. That's plenty long enough. So right now, the state, I think, is functionally doing a Sweden experiment, just not calling it that.
We have been for a while. So the real issue we have is that when we have 200 people at a religious event or a concert or whatever, or a funeral, they have the potential to turn into a super site. However, the bulk of our deaths have been nursing home deaths, and people are writing those deaths off. I think those deaths matter, but they are writing them off. We're just going to have to see how it turns out. We don't know. What I will say is, and I'm just going to say this loudly and proudly because I haven't heard anybody say it, it's great for Social Security and it's great for the social benefit programs because it's taking off the disabled and it's taking off the aging, and that's a moral crisis. But don't think for a second that the people are saying, well, I'm not 65. Yeah, you're not 65 until your lungs don't work. And the people in power are going to say, we're going to take some risk and open it up. And it might work out for the numbers, but I don't know what to say, really. We just need to see how the numbers work out, and we need to monitor those numbers because at some point the wagon comes for somebody you care about.
Yeah, and then you'll be raising holy hell for your mother who can't make it into the hospital because there's literally no room.
The only reason I'm not training right now is my parents. That's it.
Well, you're also not training for the parents of someone you never met, right?
Right.
You're also, like, it's not just your parents. It's also the skip the dishes driver. I mean, you're not going to interact that much with them. That's a dumb example. But your coworkers, fathers, brothers, uncles, friends, parents, right? Like, the more virus we create in society.
You're one moral plane higher than me because at this point, it's just my parents. I thought about quarantining my barn from my family and saying, look, I'm going to go grapple and do what I'm going to do. And I'm not going to see you guys for 2 months. We're going to see how this works out because we're crazy. We're crazy, you know. But I haven't done that yet because I'm just like, to your point, I don't know. The whole thing is confusing. But what I would say to email is if you're going to be a knucklehead and you're going to eat the donut, pick your study buddy like you did, exercise the moral risks, the risk mitigation that you can, and have some type of practical solution.
Right.
Stephan, I think it's important to say that because people aren't going to be moral. They're dumb. This is the fucking BJJ community. They're fucking knuckleheads. They came into the ring. No offense to Emil, who's a younger guy. But, Stephan, you got one kidney. But you came into this originally because you had demons. The only reason we step into a ring to fight somebody is we had some demon to fight. We're not like intellectuals. We're not the best risk mitigators. But if we can have some at least a little bit, get our guys, as the older guys, to get some little risk mitigation, maybe we'll be better off. That's all I'm saying.
So go ahead, Emil.
I was going to say, so that kind of leads me to another topic that I wanted to kind of bring into this. We've got in the jiu-jitsu world, and in the MMA and in the martial arts world, there are your pro competitors. There are people, and there are your pro athletes. And by that I mean I'm including gym owners. How long do those people not make a living?
They've been training the whole time, most of them.
Hey, that's not what I said. I didn't say they. No, that's not what I said though. They haven't been making a living.
Yeah. Right.
It's a really tough question. I mean, there are various programs, and a lot of people fall through the cracks. And I mean, it's even a trap to open up. Like, there's a lot of, say you open up, and half your students show up, and the other half say, you know what, I'm sitting this out. I'll come back in August. Mm-hmm. Your landlord now looks at you and goes, you're open. Give me my money. But I've only got half my students. Fuck off. Give me my money. I've already done with it. I gave you 3 months of deferred rent or no rent. I want all my money because I'm about to go broke.
Well, Stephan, I'll even escalate that a little bit from the Joseph Schumpeter perspective. Just because you enter a jiu-jitsu business does not mean that you have any warranty that with an external shock, your jiu-jitsu business won't be eaten alive. Have another skill. Do something else.
I agree. Like the people who purchased the Blockbuster franchise, they were SOL when Netflix came along, right? Like I'm not saying that's the case with jiu-jitsu.
And I wouldn't
say the next year is going to be tough for jiu-jitsu, really tough.
I mean, I would have been one of those guys. I said, no, Blockbuster, they'll be there forever. That's a good model.
Yeah. No, I think it's a bit different here because jiu-jitsu will be back. When? We don't know. When you look at the potential, like how wrong this could possibly go. If we're talking a Great Depression, if we're talking like conflict with China, if we're talking things like that, then really, like, I know that the gym seems like the center of the universe, but you know, there are bigger issues in society than jiu-jitsu. I mean, I'm taking a hit here. Like I'm actively trying to not kill, but I'm trying to put into hibernation the sport that I make half my livelihood from. And that sucks, right? And I've been accused of like, yeah, sure, you want to sell online programs. So you don't want people to train in real life. You just want to sell online programs. Well, no. Tell you what, when people are scared financially and can't train, they buy less instructionals. So no, nice try. This hurts me. Now, does it hurt me as much as a jiu-jitsu gym owner? No, I'll admit to that, but it does hurt me. And it's always more reassuring that somebody has really thought something through when they're advocating something that's bad for them individually, right? Like if it's pretty convenient.
You're an honest actor.
Sorry?
You're absolutely an honest. I feel like both of you are honest actors. That's why I have you on here.
Yeah, like it's not really very surprising that all of a sudden, half of the gym owners I know have become fans of Plandemic, fans of Bill Gates putting microchips up your nose, fans of this is a hoax, this is no worse than the flu, and guess what? It serves them, right? That's a narrative that serves them. It I don't know the exact numbers in my circle. It's fairly rare for a gym owner to go, fuck, this is terrible.
So, Stephan, here's my challenge to you. How many lives will we save if we switch our narrative as leaders? And I'm not saying you have to do this, but I've made a pivot. And it's not because I think it's academically the best move, but because it's a practical move. I've pivoted. I'm guilty. And I'm telling my people now, like, if you're gonna eat the donuts, 12 feet apart, touchless thermometers, study buddy, open the bay doors, exercise every reasonable precaution you can. I know you're going to do it anyway, so just be as reasonable as you can about it, and don't be a moron.
There's a lot of people who are not going to do it anyway, like, but some will. What's that percentage in the greater jiu-jitsu community? I don't know, 50%.
I'm guessing 80% are going to. I think 80% are being dumbasses without restrictions. So if that's true, and I'm wrong all the time. My wife will tell you. She's laying here right now. But if I'm not wrong, and 80% are being total dumbasses, what can we do, Stephan, you and I, as the older fucking guys, you with no hair and me with only a little bit of hair, what can we do to steer
and
them?
Emil with that gorgeous head of hair just teasing us.
I know. Look at Emil with the fro. But what can we do to tell them, don't abandon all precautions. Like be a leader. Be a leader. Exercise some reasonable precautions.
I wish. How much luck did you have stopping guys with ringworm from coming into the gym?
0.
Yeah.
But so here, I guess here's
let's revisit that though. I don't want to let Stephan off the hook with that. This ain't ringworm. This is something that can kill people.
Yeah.
So what's our leverage point?
Yeah, ringworm is arguably more visible, right? Like this is some theoretical disease that you've read on a YouTube, that you've watched a YouTube video about.
You're doing a great job, Stephan. You're being an evangelist for like this is the science. I love that. You and I disagree on some points regarding like one or two of the therapies, but I love what you have to say, and I think it's solid. It's certainly solid.
Okay, let me say this. I don't think. Okay, I can't even say you shouldn't be training right now because it depends where you live, right? That's pretty clear in the guidelines that Dr. Chris Moriarty published, and I thought were pretty good. It depends on where you live. But let's say you're in an area where you shouldn't be training, where the state or the municipal or the countrywide guidelines say don't fucking train. Let's assume that.
Well, Stephan,
and let's assume you're going to train anyway. Let's limit the damage, and also let's limit your exposure.
Taking temperatures.
For sure.
Happen anywhere. For
sure. The taking the temperature is a smart thing. It's probably 50% effective, right? Well, that's 50% better than nothing.
I'll take it.
Yep, I'll take it. Limiting to just one training partner.
Bingo.
Is probably, well, no, it's not probably. Is certainly safer than just going back to business as normal.
If you're in Alaska for the next month or two, limiting one training partner is probably a good idea.
Yeah, I would. I don't think it's a good idea, but I think it's better than the alternative.
Right.
I'll draw a line in the sand there because I know that there are lots.
Make a rule. It's wholesome.
Stephan, I got to ask though, is training ever a good idea? Because again, that's back to my point that I made earlier that kind of got shut down, but it's just a reality. Yes, this is not the flu. Yes, this is more dangerous than the flu. Yes, the flu can theoretically kill you.
Sure. It's just a question of scale, really. I think, like in theory, like I'm trying to think of an example here.
While you're thinking, Emo, we're lucky you're not a 20-year-old. You're a 30-something-year-old, and you got a smart noggin on you, so you're a leader too. You might be a brown belt. You're a black belt. I don't care. We got to put some encouragement to people not to be disregarding the situation. There's a virus. There's got to be
right. Yeah. It's much more dangerous than the flu, without a question.
Right.
However, we have times during the year, 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, last year, where training you could kill your mother.
Sure. The difference is if you get the flu, not only is COVID more dangerous, let's say 10 to 20 times more dangerous. It depends on which numbers you crunch. It depends if you're comparing apples to oranges, but significantly more dangerous. It's also significantly more transmissible because if you get the flu, the period of where you're infectious but asymptomatic is very small. Most of the time you're infectious when you're symptomatic. So if you come to class and you're coughing and you've got a cold sweat, I can say, I'm not training with you. The thing with COVID, it is not 100%, but there's lots of asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic people who are still infectious. And that's how this damn thing spreads. So that probably adds up to, 2 to 3 orders of magnitude more dangerous of being transmissible. And so, yes, if we never wanted anybody to die ever of the flu, we would wear masks all year round. We would stay 6 feet apart all year round. We'd never do jiu-jitsu. I grant you that, but that's a little bit of I drive to work. I try not to kill people. Occasionally, if I drive for 1,000 years, I'm going to kill somebody.
Right.
And you too. So we do take risks as a society for both enjoyment and for the greater good. But I'm not allowed to drive at 200 miles an hour down a residential street. Why? Because the odds of my killing somebody just went up by a factor of 10.
Now, Emil, Stephan and I are both old enough to remember, and you were almost there, to where the only thing you had to worry about when you had sex without a condom was herpes and pregnancy, And,
I don't remember that.
And HIV was the gay man's leukemia. You wouldn't get it, blah, blah, blah. I used to work with HIV patients in the Bush Senior and the Reagan administration. So that changed things. And things have to change a little bit now because we have a novel infection. I'm not saying it's HIV grade. And I'm certainly not saying it's Ebola grade. But when it comes to our grapple foo and we're swapping spit, So what I'm asking you to do, and the other guys like you, is get the touchless thermometers, pick study buddies, and until this thing rides out, until there's vaccines, until there's established pharmacies, which Stephan is a very good game on. I'm a little more liberal on because I'm a little bit more aggressive. Let's just make some reasonable precautions so we don't kill my parents, your parents, and I infect somebody else. They kill somebody else's parents. Let's just continue to exercise precautions.
Of course.
That's my message.
Right, of course. Right now, there's no safe way to get back to training 100%. My gym is opening up. My gym is opening up by the state's guide. Like, the state is allowing my gym to open up on the 26th. I'm still waiting another week just because I don't fucking trust it. Like, I just don't trust it.
So I want to continue to be the academic and the very skeptical. I think that's brilliant. And I'm coming in on a different measure saying, look, I know you knuckleheads are going to do some shit, but what can you do to mitigate the most risk? And it's not going to be as much of the risk as Stephan wants, but for you fucking knuckleheads, no offense, I'm a knucklehead. Look, my knuckle pops out of my hand. What can we do to mitigate the most risk, knowing you guys are going to be badly behaved?
That's an excellent question, Stephan.
Same answer as before. You shouldn't do it. If you're going to do it, if you're willing to play Russian roulette with other people's heads, then let's reduce the chance that you're going to get a live round in that revolver. Hey, gun reference from a Canadian. Let's reduce that as much as we possibly can.
Stephan, I love your message. You understand why I pivoted. Like, my guys are already doing this. They're doing this with or without me. So I'm like, hey, what? You just
right now, is this a question of give them an inch and they'll take a yard? Hey, he said it was all right to train.
No, Stephan,
like I see that here. I see that here in my province.
Some of my guys are being idiots, absolute idiots. I'm being honest with you. Like, I'm telling you, like this, that, the other thing. They're not going to listen. And some of my guys, like Emo, are taking reasonable precautions. So I'm trying to do the practical good I can do right now. I'm scrambling, man.
So I like to kind of.
I welcome you to respond to that. That's why.
I don't really have a response.
What can I tell these guys? They're going to do it anyway. They're doing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's when I start feeling fatalistic about this whole thing, and when I say the United States is doing a Sweden experiment and Canada might be doing a Sweden experiment. I don't know.
Don't make me pick on Canada, Stephan. I can do it.
We pick enough on ourselves already. We're inoculated, or we're immune, to use the word du jour.
So I wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about some of these conspiracy pandemic things that have been flying around that I think we all have a chuckle at. But
no, I don't chuckle at all. It's the single most depressing thing that I'm seeing. So I don't chuckle. I almost cry myself to sleep about it.
Stephan, it is depressing because I'm in this interagency brief where you actually hear from the ICUs, and then these guys on Facebook are like, nah. I'm like,
yeah. Sorry, but we cut a meal off. Okay, yes, conspiracy. Go.
So the question is the fact that this stuff has been removed from social media and from YouTube, in fact, backfiring and causing it to spread more?
Two things. I have, like most reasonable people, I have pretty serious concerns about the censorship of this. That being said, it's not quite censorship. It's freedom of speech isn't the same as freedom of dissemination, right? Like, freedom of speech means I can go out in the street and say, Trudeau is a fucking idiot. And I can say that. And I don't get shot. I don't get beheaded. I don't get thrown in the Bastille. Doesn't mean that national television needs to give me an audience and have me saying, like, the television networks are under no obligation to give me that airtime to express my point of view. So but I agree, it's worrying.
Counterpoint, Stephan, they made them martyrs. They made those Bakerfield doctor martyrs.
Yeah.
With their selection bias and all their mathematical error, they made them martyrs, the ignorant masses.
Yep. And pandemic, in at least some of that footage is in that documentary. is copyrighted footage. So when they said they're going to take this down, well, yeah, they're going to take it down in part because it's copyrighted footage. Like if I was going to
watch that video, so I can't comment.
Oh, it's just the same standard like voiceover, create a hero. I mean, here's the problem. Here's one problem with conspiracy theories. Are you familiar with the term Gish Gallop?
Yeah.
Okay. So I saw Dwayne Gish speak once. This is, I don't know, 30 years ago. Dwayne Gish was a creationist, and he might still be around. And he would just go and he would like, he'd go into these rants where it's like 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, 0.7, 0.8, 0.9, 0.85. And you'd be there like, okay, 0.1, that's actually kind of a nuanced point. 0.155, 0.157. Well, I'm not done with 0.1 yet. 0.395, 0.396. But I'm just halfway through getting to the bottom of 0.1 here. So basically, Plandemic is like a 20-minute long or 30-minute long Gish Gallop of assertions. So I went and I did some research on, I looked into it. the phrase I hate the most. Mikovits, right? Like the paper that was suppressed by the, like the groundbreaking stuff on chronic fatigue research. All right. So I look into it. Yeah, it was published in Science. So first of all, it was suppressed. It was published in the biggest journal, or one of the two biggest journals in Science. It's like getting the front page of, I don't know, the New York Times or the homepage of Fox News. Like it's not suppressed. It's out there. And she was also the 12th author on it, meaning that she was in the room and had a pulse and maybe moved a petri dish around. She's not the main publisher of it at all. And then if you follow through it, Science went and said, you've got this methodological error that could totally have screwed up your whole research. Please respond. The authors didn't respond. And Science came out and said, here's what we think happened. We think the samples were contaminated by this, that, and the other thing. We're going to pull this paper. So this paper that she was like 12th author on got pulled for seemingly valid reasons that the authors never responded to. So that's 0.1. In the first 30 seconds of that fucking video, they make this assertion. Now, really, I'm going to waste the next, but that takes a long time to go through one of the central assertions.
The counterpoint is the media has turned into tabloids, and academia, particularly in the social sciences, is garbage. It's ruined.
Okay, but I don't think the argument about academia and the social sciences, I believe you have a point there, or there's certainly a point there, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about social sciences here. We're talking about sort of the hard sciences of statistics, the hard science of virology, immunology,
well, they have to do their
medicine.
Job.
I'm sorry?
They have to do their job.
Yeah, but the craziness and the sort of the overrepresentation of, I don't know, LGBTQ, A, B, C, D, E, F, G issues in academia, that's mostly a social sciences issue.
Yeah, I agree.
So that's a different argument for a different day.
I agree. But we do need some competing models. So, for instance, if the hospitals could have patient registries with anonymized data reporting their outcomes like a fireside chat, and I'm going in a rabbit hole here, but some of the peer-reviewed models, they're just not fast enough and transparent enough. We have the technology.
MedRxiv is not peer-reviewed.
Agreed.
3,500 papers in there about COVID in the last 3 months.
We need more of that. We need more open, critical review, and we could do a better job.
I'm not deep enough in the. I mean, my days of like writing and reviewing papers are long past me. I'm not sure what the process is now, but I think there's a ton of data coming out. Right, the problem's not so much more data; it's being able to process and integrate and separate good data from bad at this point. And of course, there's 1,000 more studies that need to be done too, but they're being done.
The media is tabloids. Academia has some problems. And we need to accelerate a more open peer review process that's open to everybody and transparent.
I think we've gotten around I'll stick my heels in with the peer review thing, because right now so much of the stuff coming out is before peer review, is before publication, and so that's not the gating factor. That's not the rate limiting factor. But everything else I would agree with. I think peer review,
if we're debating, if the hospitals publish their outcomes with anonymized data, so the patient names were removed, but we knew the demographics, we knew the outcomes, we'd be better off. These are called patient registries. We don't do it.
Yes, I'll totally agree to that. And I believe, and here I'm talking outside of my area of expertise, so correct me if I'm wrong, it's part of the problem with the American model of healthcare is there's so many competing or disparate hospitals and health authorities that the sort of central.
If it's an American problem, why not Canada?
Because we have a much more centralized healthcare system.
But you don't do it either.
Well, okay. So I'm sure there are people doing it, but it's not being released to the public, right? There's a bunch of data I'd love to see from the province of British Columbia, and it's being withheld. But I don't think, even if you wanted to do it in the States, it'd be very tough. Like if
I've got a PhD and 3 master's degrees, why should I have the data before you? Or any of it.
Okay. So my point, I'm not arguing that. I'm saying that my understanding is that even if they said, yes, you can have access, here's the data, here's the raw data, crunch it however you want, that they wouldn't be able to provide you with that in the States because they'd have to go to this hospital, and this hospital codes it this way, and other hospital codes it. That's my understanding.
I'm going to offer a disparate opinion. We just have some entrenched players, and we need to continue to destroy this resistance so we can have more fireside chats. We have the enabling technologies. We could do a better job informing the public. I'm a government consultant, and I'm an academician, and we just need to keep destroying those walls. Destroy the walls, release it to the public, and let everybody who wants to get involved and can get involved.
Sure. I mean,
then you'd be the new conspiracy, or then you'd be the new. I mean, I feel like if you look at the information we're being given and the lens that it's being given to us through, it engenders mistrust.
Emil, I don't think your generation has ever gotten anything but an opinion editorial. Stephan and I were just a little bit older, just a little bit. But like the news used to be like, here are the facts, draw your own opinion. Now everything has a conclusion. And that's the problem.
And it gets politicized, right? If we like that problem, while I agree with you in principle, if all that data got released, Fox News would crunch it one way, and CNN would crunch it the other way, and you'd have I've definitively proved that this disease is 10 times less deadly than the common cold, versus somebody else going, no, it's about 1% infection fatality rate, and it would create almost more noise. Now I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what the answer is.
I don't either. But what I will say is this, Stephan. What I think we can probably agree on is that our populace is fed a series of headlines. They rarely go past the headlines. If they do, if they read the article, they don't go back to the data source, and there's usually a conclusion, heavy bias. My goodness. If we could at least get back to the original data sources, we might be better off.
Yeah. I'm content to go back to the original studies, and that's already 100 times more than most people are doing. They're reading the headline. If you're really lucky, they read the half of the article before the bright blinking, like,
I'll give you an
10
example.
Celebrities caught on the beach. You won't believe what they look like now.
I hate links. I hate when people post a link like it is proof. Well, you got to go to the data. What was the methodology? I'll give you a classic.
I hate
example.
YouTube video links.
Yeah.
I think in this era, and my heuristic is if somebody proves a point with a YouTube link, right away there's like an 80% chance that they don't know what they're talking about at all.
Yeah.
It's not 100%, but it's about 80%.
I'll give you I'll throw you a softball. Climate change. The IPCC, most people don't read the studies. This is a very politicized issue, and further, the IPCC, which is the leading institution on climate change, is by definition a political institution. So I could very easily be labeled a climate change denier just by pointing out and actually posting the limitations that are in the studies that the IPCC references on climate change. The public has been misled and continues to be misled. A lot of those studies aren't reliably predictive. None of the projections for COVID-19 have been reliably predictive. And why do I say that? Because I'm a data scientist. People in my field, the second a climate change scientist does research with people in my field, they say immediately, we can't predict the future. Just like we can't predict the future of COVID-19. Hence my 8 ball.
So what you're saying and what people are going to hear are different there. You're saying that, if I understand you correctly, that modeling something like climate or modeling something like COVID-19 behavior is really difficult and highly prone to error.
Yes, potentially useful, but not reliably predictive.
Okay. Which is different from saying that there is no such thing as climate change, and which is different from saying that COVID isn't a problem.
Right.
But people hear one and they immediately go to the other. Scientist says...
But here's the difference, though. Now, I'm not ever saying this is what's going to happen with COVID-19, and I'm not ever saying this is what's going to happen with the climate. But a lot of people do, and that's wrong. It's wrong to mislead the public that way without addressing the limitations of our own power of prediction.
I think I would have an argument with you on the climate change front, seeing that was a large part of what I did my master's on. I'm pretty invested in that. While I would agree that the modeling. Sorry.
Whereas I have no investment, I just look at the data. This is why nobody invites a statistician to a party. Would just eat all the good hors d'oeuvres and drink the liquor and leave.
But maybe that's a conversation for a different day, because we've already gone down some major rabbit holes. I mean, I think I'm gonna restrain.
Stephan, I think this is a good one, because just today I had somebody else present a current day prediction. This is what the Sweden thing is going to be, because we're not going to know Sweden's numbers for 2 months. We don't even know our own numbers for 2 months. There's a time lag. None of our ability to predict is lousy, and I'm a data scientist. We're lousy at it,
sure.
Particularly in complex environments, even more so in chaotic environments. We're just lousy at it.
Yep. But the trouble is, people hear that, and then they say there is, models all wrong with COVID, and they take home the message: there is no problem with COVID.
True.
Or climate change models. I mean, you tweak the the assumption about the amount of froth on the ocean and the amount of reflection of sunlight out of the ocean back into the space, and you end up with different numbers. Sure.
Well, Stephan, isn't this where you and I sin and our community sins, the academicians? Because we somehow put ourselves forward as expert, as if we're Kreskin, and then we talk about climate change, we talk about COVID-19, we put numbers out and we say this is what's going to happen, and then the public begins.
But the climate change thing is already happening. It's ticking along. It's the models. I mean, the climate change is happening right now. People are like, well, I can't trust data from NASA. Okay, so then show me data that you would trust. There is no data that you can trust. Okay, great. So we've essentially removed all frame of reference and any way to prove anything.
Stephan, I love it. We gotta find a different way to communicate with the public to motivate them, but without putting on the drapes that were the Wizard of Oz. We have to find a better way.
Yeah. I'm mostly looking at the data that says climate change is happening. Here's a whole bunch of examples of ways in which we know it's happening. Choose the metric that you want. Snow late in the year in fucking West Virginia, notwithstanding, because that's one data point.
Definitely. Even with climate change, we can't predict a fucking thing. We don't even simulate cloud cover well enough. And we can't predict where COVID's going to hit, how long it's going to last. We need to have the courage to say we don't know, and still find some way to motivate the public to take preventative actions.
How many times have I said I don't know in this chat? Quite a few times, I think.
I know. You have.
And I think I started it out by going that anyone who says this is the way that's going to go.
No, you're right. You're right.
Away,
but whether it's climate change or COVID-19, we need to do a better job of informing the public there's a potential problem without misleading them, overemphasizing our predictive reliability, but still motivate them. It's very puzzling, because so many of my peers actually will say the end justifies the means. And then once we lose the public's trust, we lost them, man.
Yep.
Well, I mean, that's why pointing to things like China, pointing to things like Sao Paulo, pointing to things like Mexico City, pointing to things like Quebec, pointing to things like New York City, and saying it's not a prediction. It's already happened. Or pointing to
New York City is so very different from other cities. And if you look at, I posted a meme the other day, and honestly, it was almost in jest of New York State versus Florida, where there's more population in Florida, but somehow COVID hasn't affected Florida the same as it has New York.
like Stephan, I'll take it in another direction. People are very critical of the anti-vaxxer movement, but this is unfair. What we need to do is say we need to do a better job of testing who may have an adverse reaction to a vaccine and improve our vaccine models.
Yep.
If we don't have that, what can we do to inform the public that if you have a peanut allergy, don't eat the peanut? We need to do a better job. I'm for vaccines.
Yeah, I've kind of the same mindset as far as that goes.
Yeah, the trouble is an asymmetrical playing field. If I'm an anti-vaxxer, I can spout 10 untruths in a minute, and it'll take you an hour to unpack each one of them. Right? That's what I'm talking about.
But take COVID-19. I want us to move fast, but carefully, because if we produce a vaccine that has an adverse reaction, we'll set the public trust back 10 years.
Agreed. 100% agreed. And I think the people who are doing the early testing for this vaccine are very, very brave. But just because a reasonably small cohort of, 100 people doesn't have an adverse reaction doesn't mean there aren't adverse reactions. It also doesn't mean there aren't like secondary and tertiary effects down the road where, oh, guess what? You had this vaccine and this other illness comes along, you've had dengue fever, and that turns out that your antibodies eat your brain or whatever, right? Like immunology is really complicated, as it should be.
Do a better job of not ridiculing the anti-vaxxer movement and saying, look, if you had a kid that had an adverse reaction, we respect that. Of course, your voice is going to be loud. We should have done a better job. What can we do from a science perspective of better identifying those who have an adverse reaction?
I don't know. I think this is the era of conspiracy theories. I think the COVID thing and the anti-vax movement are very, very closely tied. I've tried to talk people out of conspiracy theories. To deprogram somebody is
people that do have an adverse reaction to certain vaccines. We could do a better job. We have to do a better job.
Okay, yes, we could do a better job of explaining adverse reactions. The trouble is, you combine a doctor saying, look, there's a 0.001% chance that your kid has a reaction to this. And then that the mother goes and listens to Jenny McCarthy or whoever. And somehow the 0.001% chance gets conflated with Jenny McCarthy saying your kid will get autism, which is clearly a lie.
Bullshit.
And I think part of the problem is just the lack of science education, and I don't know how to solve it. I don't
either, to be honest. I'm for vaccines, so you know.
Yeah, I just wanted to put something out there, just my personal experience. 2 years ago, or maybe it was 3 years ago now, my wife insisted that I get the flu shot because I hadn't gotten a flu shot for a long time, and she was like, no, the flu this year is supposed to be pretty bad. Get the flu shot, please. I get the flu shot. My lymph node on that side swells up for about a month, and I feel under the weather the whole time. I get it again the next year, and that same effect happens for about 2 months. So I go to my doctor. I'm like, hey, this is the effect I'm having. And my doctor makes the point that the flu shot really does not have a great effectiveness. And if I'm having this sort of adverse reaction, I should just not take the flu shot anymore. And this leads me to the next question that we have from our viewers. We have Rocco Maurer asking another question. He's saying, I'm not knowledgeable about vaccines. However, the flu vaccine being roughly 25% effective, can we expect a coronavirus vaccine to be 100% effective? And if not, then what?
I'll mostly let you handle this, but first of all, it's not about 25% effective, it's about 50% effective if you average it across different years. So that's and I would doubt very much that coronavirus vaccine is going to be effective, but it might not be the only treatment. There's lots of other prophylactics and before and after treatments. It's an RNA-based virus, so RNA-based viruses change a lot faster than DNA-based viruses. We don't have a great track record of making vaccines for coronaviruses, a family of viruses, but you throw 1 million scientists, highly motivated scientists, at a problem, maybe we make a giant breakthrough. They tried pretty hard with a vaccine for HIV, and they didn't really succeed. It didn't end up being an HIV vaccine. It ended up being an HIV multi-drug treatment, which is pretty effective, as I understand. I don't really know that much about that area. But, you throw 1 million scientists from just about every country in the world against the problem. we could probably be dealing with a coronavirus for a while. And what's the and to go back to the previous discussion, how effective is a vaccine if 50% of people in society take it? It's not going to be as effective as 100%.
Well, that's another point. This is uncomfortable, but we may not be able to produce an effective coronavirus vaccine.
Yep, agreed. But hopefully the standard of care will improve. Hopefully there'll be other treatments.
Right.
Maybe your zinc plus HCQ thing plus oil of oregano plus whatever, plus bleach, plus ultraviolet light will be the magic cure for coronavirus, and it'll be bad but not terrible.
You know what I've been taking? I've been taking a lot of spirulina and chlorella. I found that no, seriously, I used to get a lot of upper respiratory tract stuff, and when I started taking spirulina and chlorella, it just stopped happening. I just stopped getting sick. I mean, I'm not saying that's it's going to have any effect for anybody else. It's just my own anecdote, but shit.
Well, Emil, I'd like to take the opportunity to say a few things. Number one, you've got a ridiculous Jufro. Number two, I consider Stephan, from the jiu-jitsu perspective, one of the early Canadian pioneers and honorary American state pioneers, and certainly from a scientific perspective and a moral perspective, I mean, 10 out of 10. So I hope you keep making your message. And I'm not to your plane. I'm a little more, Jesus, I know you guys are going to eat the donuts, so what am I going to do about it? But I just want to say, Stephan, I think your message is great. I hope you keep it up. I love the information. And everybody recognizes you've been disseminating jiu-jitsu in a manner before jiu-jitsu was disseminated that widely, so thank you.
I'm glad I've been disseminating all over the place.
Yeah, you're one of those guys. Like, keep some Kleenex handy. But I just wanted to say thank you, and I think the world of you. You're fantastic.
Well, thank you. I just hope people are careful. Like, opening up doesn't mean completely open. It means opening in stages. Rolling doesn't necessarily mean rolling with everybody the way that you used to. It might mean rolling with one person initially. It might mean doing solo drilling. It might mean focusing on conditioning for another month. Eventually there'll be a solution. Like, please guys, let's be careful. Let's not fuck this up for everybody. Let's not give jiu-jitsu a bad name. If you hate regulation, just you watch how regulated the sport's going to be if jiu-jitsu gyms become the epicenter of super spreader events, right? If you look at the literature on, you've seen the literature on the super spreader events, right?
It's scary.
Yeah, like basically, there's just another
Johnny
one.
Infecting seeds, I call them. They travel to one other area, have a big event, everybody gets infected.
Yeah. So in those sorts of instances, are we seeing that different kinds of contact yield different kinds of infectivity?
The most number one.
The most interesting of that is, well, I mean, the gay dude in South Korea went to like 10 different clubs and gave to 100 different people. Let's not even include that. But there was just a study out of South Korea of the different fitness clubs. Did you see that?
No.
So
I just saw that today, actually.
Yeah. So they did a study, I want to say, of 20 or 30 or 40 fitness clubs in South Korea. And basically there was like dancercise, yoga, and Pilates. And the fitness classes were super spreader events, right? That's where there were many super spreader events associated with people going, breathing heavy and spewing tiny droplets all over the place, and none associated with Pilates and yoga in those same centers. So basically lying on the floor, softly chanting, trying to squeeze yourself into downwards dog, reasonably safe, jumping all over the place, huffing and puffing, not even touching. Presumably they're not hugging each other.
A lot of
bad.
spread.
So it's not at all encouraging for jiu-jitsu. That study sucked.
Jiu-jitsu is the worst. It's a total swap spit. So, Stephan, I just want to ask a few closing questions. Now, it is true Trudeau did a gun grab. That's true.
Allegedly.
Now, you got 2 years to it now. It is also true on at least 3 occasions Trudeau was in blackface.
Yes.
Canada does call their country the Great White North.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Bob and Doug McKenzie.
Yes. Now, every year there's a large number of the native tribes, the women particularly, just disappear.
Not quite true. There is a section in British, like there are probably serial killers out there who specialize in killing native prostitutes. That is true.
Your African American or your African Canadian and your Caribbean Canadian populations are single digits.
It's true in British Columbia. It's not true in Ontario.
So my question is, are you guys eating them in the winter? The Ku Klux Klanada. This is the conspiracy I wanted to ask.
Ku Klux Klan.
No, we just take the reason we've managed to successfully control COVID compared to you guys is because we follow the ancient Inuit tradition of taking our elders and putting them out on ice floes in the winter. So that gets very confusing. There is a cull in the winter, but it's of our elderly. Hence, our COVID numbers are lower.
So is it your position that the Great White North is in fact like white supremacy?
I would say, to answer this seriously, one of the third rails of America is race. I'm not sure race is the third rail of Canada. I think it's language. The French versus English is probably the Canadian split. I think race issues are less here. I mean, every Canadian native watching this is angry at me right now, and that's certainly a valid point. Like, there's some major economic. I've been in a lot of very, very poor.
My question is: are you required to say this, or will your Canadian neighbors beat you up?
I'm not required to say this, and I'm tougher than my neighbors, and I have guns.
That I believe.
And I have guns.
You're right. That's why I like you. Right. Although you are awfully pale.
That's just the lighting. Here, we'll get a...
Emil, do you have concerns that Stephan Kesting is, in fact, a white supremacist?
I mean, concerns? I don't know.
You know what?
Concerned.
I did. When I started Grapple Arts...
I mean, he had Oliver Taza. Oliver Taza isn't exactly a white guy.
He's all right. Who's that one dude? The other Stephen. The guy... Is his name Stephen? What's his name? Rob
Bernacki.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
I like him. Obviously, I've worked with him a bunch.
Right.
No, years ago, somebody got in touch with me to tell me I'd made an appearance on Stormfront. I think stormfront.org, and that's definitely
you look a lot like that guy.
You and Rob did a DVD series together.
A couple, 3.
Yeah, he's a good guy.
Yeah.
But that was a painful DVD. There was a little controversy about that because the Danaher Death Squad. They said, "Oh, Rob does this. He does this."
Rob watched what they were doing, reverse engineered it, gave them credit.
Right. And it had nothing to do with white supremacy at all.
Nothing.
Right.
Nothing. And another guy I've worked with at least twice. I've worked with Todd. Here I'm defending. Do you deny being a white supremacist? Yes. Or when did you start denying that you're a white supremacist? Well, then I guess working with Elliot Bayev, a Jew, would be just a very, very clever way for me to infiltrate that community. Sorry?
Oh, he has a Jewish friend.
I have a Jewish friend.
He's got the hair and he's...
But yeah, I've spent a lot of time in very, very poor communities up north. So I think there's definitely racial inequity here in Canada, but I don't think we have the same level of problems as you do in the States.
You got a lot of mob and drug trade. That's your thing.
Yeah, there's definitely some of that. I mean, there's a lot of the fentanyl coming in, comes in from China to here.
Would you stop, Bill? Would you stop?
I love you, Stephan. You know I do. I'm busting balls now. It's the end of the interview. I got to bust balls.
It's on a scale of 1 to Fire Hall. We're at about a 2, so bring it on.
All right.
Fair. Well,
you haven't questioned my sexuality yet, my orientation.
I don't care about that because I'm a liberal. What do I care? I want you to own guns and be as gay as you want, smoke your pot, eat your mushrooms. I don't care.
I don't know that's liberal. That's more libertarian.
Nah, those guys are fucking crazy, just like the Marxists. You got to scale it back. They're too in love with the philosophical ideal.
Well, my one hope is that I get to train with both of you in the not too distant future.
Well, you probably kick our asses. We're old.
I'd like to learn from you. How about that?
All right.
Let's first set our goals on training.
Training for 2 months, right? No training. I've been training for 2 months.
I've have used members of my household as training dummies.
Yeah.
So,
I feel like I don't even know if I know jiu-jitsu anymore. I'm like, I used to remember that.
It'll be really interesting going back.
Right. It's funny because I actually, so like I said, I've been training with the one guy rurally because I figure there's no fucking way this guy's meeting anybody that has this because he's quarantined at home and he lives fucking rurally. So like I'm the risk there. Mm-hmm. But I actually found that
he doesn't go shopping.
I mean, he does, but rurally, and they wear masks. They wear N95 masks.
All right.
So like it's just that, like I said, I mean, it's not impossible, but it's highly improbable.
So, I got to cover
something. You had me at masks.
So, Stephan, did you ever get like some wild salmon and you put like some Canadian whiskey over it for 15 minutes? Then you take the whiskey off.
No, and no.
On it, and then you let it sit with the salt and pepper for like 4 to 24 hours, and then throw it in the smoker for 220.
No. What's the punchline here? I'm missing the punchline.
There's no punchline. If you take the salmon, like some wild salmon, you put some Canadian whiskey on it for 15 minutes, take the whiskey off.
I don't fish. I don't have any whiskey in the house. And I don't try to steer clear of smoked food. So I'm going to ruin your joke here.
Stephan, you're breaking my heart. You're breaking my heart. But I love you anyway. I was giving you my very best. That's my best smoked salmon recipe. I was giving it to you.
If I ever start smoking food, if I ever feel the need, if they ever develop an effective cure for stomach cancer, if hydroxychloroquine is also a stomach cancer cure, and start taking it prophylactically, then I'll hit you up for that recipe.
You could have used maple syrup, instead of the sugar. It would have been fine.
When you travel up north to canoe, you don't go fishing?
Usually not. There's a couple of reasons for that. Number one, I thought that if I had time to fish, I had time to paddle. Number two, if you're traveling in bear country, especially traveling alone, your biggest single defense against bears is not a gun. It's not a tripwire. The biggest defense is not smelling like food and not luring bears in. So by the time you're gutting fish and cooking them and, having that fishy smoke go over your body, you're just asking for it.
Well, Stephan, I was chemically castrated from leukemia chemotherapy, so I don't judge you at all.
Okay, we got one last question from the peanut gallery. We got Dan Silvert asking, who wins in a cage match to the death between the three of you? What if it's striking only?
If it's just grapple foo, I'm giving it to Emil because we're both old as fuck. But if it's not just grapple foo, Stephan and I are old, sneaky motherfuckers. Who knows? You could lose an eye.
I feel like both of you would just stab it. I don't know.
Like Neanderthal brow ridge. Is it old school UFC with headbutts allowed? Because I've got a pretty solid noggin.
Excellent question. I honestly, I think that of the three of us, Stephan is probably the most seasoned martial artist.
Well, that all depends. When did you start, Stephan?
1981.
Oh, you beat me. You beat me by a long shot. Because I was 86 for wrestling and 91 for judo, and then like 92 or 93 for jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, so I started 93, so.
But this isn't an area where you keep on getting better. Like you reach a peak, and then it's a long, slow decline. So
that's right.
Have you ever competed, Stephan?
Oh yeah. I used to compete a fair bit.
I've watched Stephan compete wearing headgear like a nerd.
Yeah. It was when I had cauliflower ear flare up.
Yeah, Stephan's a real guy, Emil.
Yeah, I competed mostly up till brown belt, I think, and then just with the having a family and taking care of kids and working grapple arts and working the fire department, and I just the amount of training that I could do wasn't enough to justify competing, right? So I didn't want to compete if I was only going to be like 50%. I wanted to be like 75% of my capacity at least.
Now, Stephan, you were an early leg lock guy, but would you agree? I think the knee control has gotten a little bit better, and the inside heel hook, the honey hole position, has got a little more developed. Yeah,
it was I was an early adopter is the wrong word, but I was an early listener to the early leg lock evangelists like Oleg Taktarov and Eric Paulson.
Because Emil, Stephan was a leg locker from way back. He was leg locking everybody. He was always showing his leg locks.
Yeah, but the I mean, we always knew that the reverse heel hook trumped the regular heel hook, or the like a heel hook from the honey hole.
You see people like they'll give up the mount and then they'll do that mermaid thing and go for the heel hook. And when we used to do the ankle lock, leg knot from there, but like Emil on the call, he's like he'll like give up that mount and then like just fucking twist his leg around and go for that heel hook. I don't think we did as much of that.
Well, I've been doing that move since 1999.
I'm trying to visualize what you mean. So I
give up mount. Have you heard of the goat hook?
No.
Andrew Smith, Goat Fury out of Virginia?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the move that he actually kind of developed, but I was just doing it on my own, where what I do is I allow somebody to mount me, and then once they're mounted on me, I take my leg, I bring it up and around.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I thought you were in mount and giving up mount to go for a leg lock.
I can also do that, but that's not, then I'll go for honey hole.
Like grab the leg and twist it, but I think they do that stuff much more aggressively now, you know what I'm saying? I mean, like,
I don't do the kipping motion that like Gary and Gordon do. I prefer to do a hard bump and just come around. I can usually capture the leg that way.
Yeah, maybe 2 hands on the hip to push them sideways a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that's I mean, it's a good move. It's been around forever.
But when you and I were training, it was more often an ankle lock finish than a heel look, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, because
depends.
Because the competition rules at the time were mostly jiu-jitsu, right? And I'm old enough to remember when jiu-jitsu didn't ban neck cranks, didn't ban leg reaping, but about the only thing you couldn't do was heel hooks. You could wrist lock at any weight category, any age category, any experience category. You could do all that stuff.
But the heel hook prohibition, the knee reaping thing particularly, that was like a 97, 98 kind of thing. They throw throughs at you, but you could do it.
I don't remember when they brought in the knee reaping thing. It's ridiculous, I think. But it's basically designed to shut down beautiful open guard work.
Yeah.
The same way that judo gripping prohibitions are to encourage this ideal of what judo should look like.
Now, you're a judo guy yourself, and you got these long-ass fingers, but do you still grip as an older guy? I don't grip much.
No, not as much. And I tried, because my training time is not nearly what I would like, which is true of just about everybody. But I try to have a game that's as transferable between gi and no gi as possible.
Me too.
And so if I can, use a collar tie instead of a lapel grip, I will. If I can.
Do you go for heel hooks in the gi?
Only with very good friends, and only. Although I did have one guy who was training for a pro fight back in the day who injured me twice with heel hooks in the same week on both of my legs.
Jeez.
Once in the gi. So a full force heel hook applied from the gi. So
that's no bueno.
No, it was not cool. That might have been the second last time we ever trained together hard. But no, generally I don't heel hook from the gi. But generally I don't heel hook, right? The game is to get to the control position. And this is something that Rob Bernacki really explained very well. And it's not a new idea, but it's the idea of that leg locks are kind of a positional game. Just like you might be fighting to get to side mount, just like you might be fighting to get to knee mount, fighting to get to the back. You might be fighting to get to an outside ashi. You might be fighting to get to the 411. You might be fighting to get to standard ashi, right? It's if you can control the position, sure, you still got to fight for the actual finish, but the main battle is to get to the position and control the position. Especially if we're so we can spar without ever applying a leg lock. But if I can hold you in the 411 for 10 seconds while you get your way out, we both kind of acknowledge that there'd be a damn good chance that I would have managed to crank that heel hook if I'd really been trying.
I've just found just from rolling with and occasionally even competing against some pretty high level leg locker guys that if I don't have my braking mechanics perfect, they'll laugh at me. And so as a result, only with select few people that I trust to tap on time, I go for the finish.
For sure. And you don't want to do it to some idiot who then spins the wrong way.
Right, of course.
The only time I've ever torn an ACL is with a standard ankle lock. getting the guy in the ankle lock, and he spun as hard as he could the wrong way. And I should have let go, but you can't fix stupid.
Now, Stephan, one final point before Emil let you go. You would agree, Emil's a fine competitor. I'm very proud of him myself. I like to watch his matches. He's quite a character. But, these guys got to train some takedowns. I mean, this guard pulling, if that's not a vagina, I don't know what is.
While I agree that grapplers should know some basic takedowns, under the current rule sets, the main reason for training takedowns is to have some self-defense skills. I mean, if the rule sets encourage that, and you want to win the game, there's nothing wrong with it might be strategically the right choice.
So you're not going to make a vagina joke towards Emil.
He really wants you to make the vagina joke towards Emil.
Right.
I want to know who Emil is.
Who is Emil?
Right.
Emil.
I send him an email all the time.
Yeah. I'm pumped. Remember those Get in My Guard videos? The guy's walking down the street, gets in a fight, and pops to his back.
It was that with Kit Dale? Was that
Might
Kit Dale doing?
Might have been.
It looked like Kit Dale.
Anyhow.
I think you're all right. You're half a vagina, but you're okay. Yeah. And Stephan, you're as far as I'm concerned, you're the top. So I love your scientific information, and I'm so grateful for all the content you put out over the years. And you're just a good guy. So I'm not as good as you are, but you set a good example. I'll try to be half as good as you are. That's my goal.
Well, I mean, I think if we're just if we can shut down a little bit of the conspiracy thing, then I'll be happy. So
if I could just be a little more confident that Canada wasn't killing off its people of color, I'd feel better.
Yeah, you got to come to Toronto and Montreal. That's where all the people of color are.
I like Montreal. You got the good smoked beef. You got the bagels. I like Montreal. It's good.
Yeah. Fucking Canadians. Well, gentlemen,
why do we finish on fucking Canadians?
Gentlemen, thank you both for coming on and speaking tonight. Okay. I'd love to have you both on back in the near future.
All right. Thanks so
I
much.
wanted to run through.
It's really great for me to get to speak to you. I got to tell you, I think the world of you. I really do. As a matter of fact, when you come to Sarasota, Florida, I'll facilitate that. I'll put up the money. You come to Sarasota. We'd love a seminar as soon as this thing opens up. You're comfortable.
Are you talking to email?
No, he's talking to you.
Oh. The bald Canadian in the corner.
It's been a while since I've been in Florida. I'd love to go back.
Yeah, we'll get you in Sarasota. We'll take you. They got some very good beaches. If I can presumptuous and say that, and I put up the money. We'd love to have you down there, and that's a bona fide offer.
Thank you so much. Let's talk when this chaos subsides.
That's right.
So for tomorrow evening, we've got Avery Clements coming on for anybody still tuned in. Then Wednesday evening, Tim Morthland. Thursday evening, Jake Shannon. Friday evening is going to be Justin Rader. The rest of the schedule will be released in the near future. Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
That's a great mustache you got going on there. I like that mustache.
Well, yes. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Bill, and have a great night.
You too. Ciao.